The guy was blonde, standing with heavy armor, holding his sword below. Behind him in a long line were a lot of other young people. What is a hero? A hero is the greatest person of all. It is the worst enemy of the evil demon lord. Being a hero is a dream for many young people. To defeat the demon king as a brave hero and become famous throughout the lands. In front of the guy was a man who read information from parchment to him. He said that in this way, the guy would not only declare himself to the whole world and receive royal treatment, but also have more influence than the prince himself. And he will also enjoy fame and fortune all his life. The blonde stood bewildered. So that's what they say. But these people live in a completely different world and don't even know what a high-risk job is. The hero had to fight on the very front lines of the army. With high mortality, they had to look for a new hero every few years. Now, if someone went to another world, obviously this one, someone would like to enjoy their life for as long as possible. Only idiots would risk their lives. The guy was reading a paper on which it was written that the Lan Academy began to accept students. You need to work hard for your cherished dream, and then it is possible to become the next hero. The leaflet that the guy received when he entered the academy lay under his pillow for the last 6 months, and the guy completely forgot about it. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and on the other side of the door they said that Mr. Xiao had received a package and needed to sign papers. The guy went to the door, and opening it already began to say that he didn't remember that he ordered something. But then he saw a girl in uniform in front of him and just a huge ball of parcels behind him. The girl was in a blue suit and a light top, cap and short red hair. The young man scratched his head and asked if the girl was sure that it was his package. Maybe she messed something up. The girl replied that everything was correct and there could be no mistake. This was definitely his package. Having signed the papers, the guy accepted this huge parcel, a small coffin with a cross on the lid. The girl thanked him for the fact that the guy used Liu Yun's delivery. Already at home, the young man could not understand what they brought him. Opening the lid, he gasped. Beads of sweat trickled down his face as he realized that before him lay a fair-haired girl in a maid outfit. Her outfit was quite revealing, and the guy was even embarrassed. Convulsively pulling out a piece of paper, which he did not even look at, the guy began to read what was slipped to him. But the Dachshund began to glow, and the letters began to jump, and then Vise turned into the ancient language of the gods. Was it a slave contract? Does this mean that now this maid belongs to the guy? The blonde looked at her again. Slave magic is black magic that was originally created to use forced labor. Although the church condemned this magic, it later spread throughout the world and became a secret weapon for some underground organizations and dark forces. Once the contract is signed, the slave will not be able to harm the master and will not be able to resist him, and will satisfy all his needs. While the guy was reading all these details of the slave contract, his new slave, the maid, showed signs of life. She woke up, stretched sweetly and sat down on her box, the coffin, stretching her arms up. But when she realized that a man was standing in front of her, she quickly got up and asked him who he was, where she was at all. Then her gaze caught on her own clothes, and the young lady almost began to become hysterical. Why was she even in that outfit, in such shameless clothes? The blonde tried to somehow calm her down and tried to persuade the girl to let him explain everything. But she did not agree and quickly replied that she did not need any explanations from him. She, the 89th Demon Lord Alina Saint Milan, would never have thought that she would ever fall into the hands of a despised human, and so she will kill him. The boy seemed to hear only that she was the Demon Lord Alina. He just couldn't believe that this delicate and beautiful girl was a demon lord. Alina ordered the man to die, and the next moment everything seemed to explode. The guy was thinking about whether he should use wind magic or teleportation magic. But it was still too late for that. Chips of wood lay around, but as expected of a demon lord. Now the boy's house is completely and irrevocably destroyed. What's wrong with this girl anyway? Did she hurt herself? Why was the demon lord's transformation interrupted involuntarily? What is going on? Is it all because of the contract that she can't use her magic on a guy? If this is true, then he can use this spell. There was blood on the boy's thumb. He drew a sealing demon circle on the floor, and Alina wondered if he was mocking her. The guy is really capable of using the forbidden array, which can only be used by a magician who has reached the 7th level and above. Xiao put his hands forward and began to control the demon imprinting circle. Alina tried to prevent this. Luckily, the guy had installed some magic crystals. The demon imprinting line was still too much for him. Alina fell to the floor and fell asleep, but that was even better for the blonde. Let him sleep a little. The next morning the sun was shining brightly and seeping through a hole in the ceiling. Xiao was so upset that his house was destroyed. He hadn't slept all last night, plus the magical exhaustion was too severe. Looks like he won't be able to go to school today. Looking at the girl sleeping sweetly in her bed, the guy thought that she was having a very good dream. But what was he to do with the demon lord now? If he thinks to contact the Holy Church, then they may decide that the guy is on the same side with the demons. The girl suddenly woke up and asked Lin Xiao if he really studied at the Laurent Academy in the Department of Magic. She heard about Laurent Academy, Cradle of Heroes. Then she somehow angrily asked if he really wanted to be a hero. Then why shouldn't he take the risk right now and kill her, because she still can't fight back just yet. Lin Xiao put his hand to his chin as if thinking about her proposal. Alina's power was sealed by a contract. She is useless as a demon lord. Well, how she dies, it all depends on the people. Didn't they dream of killing the demon lord? Suddenly, Lin laughed out loud and suddenly asked for forgiveness. But before Alina starts to get angry, she first just has to go and wash herself. And he is also afraid that she is wrong, because he has no idea why she was mailed to him. But now that she has taken a little nap, she must return to where she came from. Alina was surprised that the young man was not going to kill her. It is said that once someone kills a demon lord, they will be named the hero of the Holy Church. But the thing is, Lin Xiao has no interest in becoming a hero. In fact, he finds it rather troublesome. Lin Xiao told Alina that she needs to go to the capital of the kingdom. There is a pawn shop in the city of Neverwinter, the heart of humanity. She will need to return to the Forest of the End directly west of this place. There she will meet with the faithful of the Holy Church. Wherever she goes, it is too dangerous for Alina here. Lin handed her a bag of coins and said that she could take this bag of gold coins. This will be enough to hire a 3-star mercenary group to escort him to the Forest of the End. Picking up a bag of gold coins, Alina began to remember that all the people she had previously met wanted to kill her. She's a demon. People have always been afraid of demons. They did everything to get rid of the demons. But this man lets her go. Lin said that the misunderstanding with the delivery had been resolved, and now all that was left was to remove her servant contract if the demon lord so desired. Alina lowered her head sadly and said that she could not cancel the contract. As a servant, she cannot go too far away from the master, otherwise it will cause a spiritual reaction. Lin did not expect this. Does this mean that the demon lord he found will now live with him? On a warm sunny day, classes were in full swing at the Laurent Academy. The students in the class were dressed in special burgundy uniforms, talking so loudly that one conversation could be heard in the class. One guy told another that he had heard that Lin Xiao's magic power had also broken through the 3rd level. On yesterday's test, he shared first place with Caesar. Last month, on the test, he was only at the initial 2nd level. How could he break through 3 stages in just 1 month? Most likely, he cheated somewhere. Suddenly, the teacher, who was an old man with a thick, long beard and mustache, coughed into his fist, drawing the attention of the students. Looking around the classroom, the old man noticed that Lin Xiao was skipping classes again. But he didn't dwell on it too much. The man named the topic of the lesson and said that today they would continue to talk about studying the personality and power level of a demon lord. The old man then asked the class if anyone knew who the demon lord was. The white-haired girl replied that the demon lord was the hero's greatest enemy. She had heard that the demon lord wanted to completely take over this world. Most likely the lord is too ugly. Master said that according to the previous hero's report, the demon lord is a terribly cruel monster. Meanwhile, at Lin Xiao's house, with a hideous appearance and enough strength to destroy the entire world. Feeling the smells of freshly cooked delicious food, Alina swallowed loudly. On the table was a plate of meat legs, lettuce, and rice. He kills and destroys, hates people and eats them alive. An absolutely barbaric creature. Therefore, they, students of the Laurent Academy, must do everything possible for humanity. After taking a bite of a delicious piece of meat, Lin Xiao told the Lord that since she was staying, there were several things that the guy should clarify. He feels that she is not at all like the book describes her. Shouldn't she have enough power to destroy the world? The girl lowered her head, pressed her hands to her chest and said that this was not all that exaggerated. It's just that she's only recently assumed the position of a demon lord and still can't use her full power skillfully. And because of the injury in the past, she did not fully inherit the strength of the progenitor. The guy remembered that once Mr. Wu Zai said that the strength of the progenitor is equivalent to the holy sword of a person. Suddenly, the Lord's stomach rumbled, and she blushed terribly. The guy was amused by this situation. It would seem that even the demon lord is starving. Lin Xiao asked her if she hated people. Does she really want to destroy all mankind and rule the world? The girl thought for a moment and mumbled that she didn't know. Shaking her head, she stubbornly stated that she had never participated in human wars before, and she's not interested in taking over the world at all. Lin was too curious about her point of view. She began to pester the girl with questions about whether she can read and write, whether she likes to draw, and so on. This made Vladika angry, and she yelled at the guy. He doesn't seem to understand what demons are. They are not as uncivilized as people think. Didn't Lin read the book studying the demon lord's power level personality? Lin Xiao did not give in to the girl's cries and said that he was asking precisely because he had read it. It was said in the book that the lord is a bloodthirsty monster that spares no one. The girl put her hands on the table and said that she hates when other people call her a monster. He is an insignificant person. How dare this guy insult her? The guy did not want to make scandals and therefore said that it was just a joke. And then he finally offered the poor hungry girl a chicken leg so that she could at least relax a little. The girl was perplexed. Is he really going to treat her like a slave? Lin must not forget her place, because she is the lord of all demons, and she doesn't need any handouts. After finishing her angry tirade, the girl shoved a chicken leg into her mouth. The guy looked at it with wide eyes and hoped that she had no idea that the chicken leg was him. Since today he missed being busy, tomorrow he definitely needs to go to school. And upon hearing this, the girl declared that she would go to school with Lin Xiao. The guy asked why she was going there, and Vladika asked if he had forgotten. She is his slave, therefore she must always be near her master, otherwise she will die. The guy did not like this idea, and he laid siege to the girl. She should stop joking around like that because Laurent Academy is not a place you can just walk into. From the thought that she would die, the lord trembled violently with her whole body. Realizing that there was no other way out, the guy exhaled heavily and said that there was one way. He asked her if she wanted to be his servant. The girl began to scream that he was an insignificant person who wants to be his maid. The next day, at Laurent Academy, a man in a beautiful suit stood near a beautiful girl and poured her tea into a mug. He told this beautiful miss that tonight's tea was royal red tea and was supposed to be tiramisu flour cake. The people sitting next to me were impressed. As expected of a child family hostess, she even has someone to serve her during class. It's just great. It's so cool to study with her at the same school. The teacher shouted to Rose that it was time for the lesson and it was not worth drinking tea. Suddenly, Lin Xiao entered the classroom, followed by the demon lord. The guy apologized for being late while the girl was nervous behind him. The teacher got angry. It's okay that he missed class yesterday, but today he decided to be late. Even after that, God bless him, they were late and okay, but he also brought a stranger to the class. The guy hesitated and said that in fact the girl is his maid. The blonde was too embarrassed to wear such a suit. All the students were stunned by her beauty. Someone shouted that they saw an angel. Someone said that she was a holy virgin of a holy church. But didn't anyone hear that Lin Xiao called her his maid? The guy thought that they were still well received. If I had to choose, then someone would choose a beautiful woman instead of a strange old man. Suddenly Rosie jumped up from the table and knocked over her mug of tea. She couldn't understand how a person like Lin Xiao could have a maid. He needs to make his lie a little more believable. The blonde stood and did not understand what this pink-haired girl had against him. The girl pointed her finger at him and said that as the student council president, she demanded that he kick this maid out of his office immediately. Lin was really perplexed. Why does she even think he can't have a maid? Didn't she herself bring someone to class with her? Rosa stood up and crossed her arms over her chest, solemnly declaring that Afu was an experienced servant of her family. And there's a huge difference between him and the girl Lin Hai here out of nowhere. The demon lord quietly went nuts on the sidelines of what she heard. Meanwhile, the guy was nervous because this Rose always has something against him. One must not get angry and accidentally give away oneself and the demon lord. The sovereign stepped forward, bowed, and said that her master was right. She really is his maid. This is their first meeting, and therefore the girl introduced herself as Alina, the owner's maid. All this was very suspicious to Rosie. She chuckled in displeasure. But the old man didn't let her continue, who said that if it was Lin Xiao's maid, then there was no problem. And now everyone should return to their seats, because classes have already begun. All this was very tiring for the blonde. He did not expect that everything would turn out this way. When the last lesson ended and the bell rang, the class was in turmoil. Everyone around whispered about the new maid while Lin Xiao sat at his desk board. He stands out too much from the rest with such news. Alina all this time stood near the guy's desk, considering all this to be too tedious. Suddenly, some guy, the prince of the kingdom of Ranbada, Caesar, from the magic department of the Laurent Academy, and a whole first-class student, removed the pendant from his neck and said that he had been waiting for Lin Xiao for a long time. Lin looked at him and noticed that the guy took off his badge without warning, and it was quite impulsive. Ranbada belligerently ordered Lin Xiao to fight him, which was quite unexpected. The other students who were standing in the class were excited about the prospect of a battle between the two. They all discussed who would win. Someone bet on Caesar, someone on Lin Xiao. In any case, this duel should be very spectacular. Nevertheless, Lin slammed his 2 fists on the table and said that he was refusing to fight. Caesar did not expect this. He asked the guy not to make him look down on him. Lin Xiao must fight him because Caesar believes that Ling is a worthy opponent to fight each other at full strength. Lin Xiao decided to make a speech in response and said that magic power is only one of the criteria for evaluating strength. On top of everything else, there's also magic control, the extent to which a mage can create magical outlines well as understanding magical knowledge, countering magic and precasting spells. These are all important bases for assessing the strength of magicians, and Caesar is clearly better at this. His enemies must be evil demons. It must be that monstrous demon lord who eats people alive with bones. But what is he doing right now? He turned his anger towards Lin Xiao, aimed at his comrade in arms. Lin is really ashamed of Caesar. Belina, standing next to her, was not happy to hear such a response from herself, and therefore stood, barely holding back all her anger. Lin Xiao told Caesar that if he withdraws his challenge now, then perhaps he will be able to maintain his dignity. Lin believes that only a real idiot can arrange a duel. If he accidentally wipes the floor with it, his dream of becoming a backup hero will go up in flames. Caesar said it was true. He really wants to be a hero. How could he be so reckless? Caesar admitted that Lin Xiao was right. This challenge was just childish. Lin hoped that Caesar would soon cancel his challenge. He looked at his broken badge, and Alina thought that the guy was too weak-willed. Everyone in the class started whispering. The guys could not believe that some maid dared to call Caesar weak-willed, and the guy himself probably heard it. But no, it was true. The blonde did not remain silent and said that she really did not understand how such a weak one like Caesar had the courage to challenge her master to a duel. Caesar didn't even have words to answer the girl, and Lin Xiao screamed at Alina what she was doing at all. Caesar threw his badge at Lin, who screamed, "This is not a magical duel, but a contest between men, and Lin Xiao can't refuse it. He has to fight." Alina held up the badge and said that he brought humiliation on himself because she was sure that her master would definitely win this contest. Out of desperation, Lin Xiao lifted his head up and whimpered that it was not true. Later, after school, the students gathered on the street and discussed the rumors that Lin Xiao and Caesar were going to have a duel tomorrow, and therefore it would be necessary to decide who would be the best. At this time, Lin Xiao and his maid walked behind the trees. The boy was simply baffled. How could a demon lord say such a thing? And terribly angry too. And so, when he turned back and glared furiously at the girl, she was even frightened. A little later, Joma, when it was night outside and the moon shone too brightly, the maid was lying on the bed in the room, and the guy was standing in front of her. The girl did not understand what he was going to do, so she asked the guy to stop moving towards her. However, the guy did not stop, and moreover, grabbed her by the leg in a white gulf. Today she terribly offended him. She made a terrible mistake, and therefore he, as her master, must punish her properly. The girl continued to kick and ask to stop, and then even called him by name. The guy did not like it, and he threateningly asked what she called him. She called him an insignificant person. The guy hung over the lord and called her too naughty maid. It seems that this was not enough, and the guy began to tickle her furiously. The girl asked to stop, but the blonde seemed to do it from all sides. He was a damn human. The guy stopped and asked what the next punishment should be. And then the lord finally apologized and said that she was very sorry that she said that in shock, and even added the prefix of the owner. But the heels did not stop, and the girl continued to endure the tickling. The next day, the students stood in front of the academy where their teacher gave them righteous speeches. The reason Laurent Academy has been given the title of Cradle of Heroes in all hope is because they put a lot of emphasis on real combat. Even if it is heavy and difficult magic, Laurent Academy expects students to use it in actual combat. Only by using magic in real battles can they become real magicians. And therefore, the combat exercises will begin in a few days, and only you who have passed the random test will be able to feel. The students began to discuss who is at what level. One guy said that he was at the beginning stage of the 2nd level, and there was no way he could get there. Another heard that combat training was too dangerous. Why are they such trash? Lin Xiao thought that the duel with Caesar would be after combat training, and how could he retrain him so that he cancelled the duel? Behind the blonde, the demon lord called out to him, again using his first name. And when she saw the tickling tool in his hands, she cursed in her thoughts and corrected herself. She asked why the academy did such a boring test. And then the guy raised his finger up and said with confidence that she didn't understand anything here. Combat training is what a hero must go through if they succeed in battle. They may have a chance of being chosen to become the hero's successor. The girl said that people are very complex. If they choose a hero, why don't they just challenge him to a duel? Lin replied that they were not so primitive. They use delicate methods to select the most suitable person. Here, for example, Caesar, he will definitely become a hero in the future. Alina was indignant because Lin Xiao's magic level is higher than Caesar's. Lin Xiao abruptly grabbed Alina's hand and dragged her away that she didn't even realize what was going on at first. The guy stopped in a remote place under a tree where no one could overhear them and leaned against the tree, pinching the girl between the tree and himself. He asked how she knew that his magical level was much higher than Caesar's. Vladica answered him that she felt it. Caesar is only the 3rd level, and the guy is in front of her. 4th, he is without a doubt the strongest student in his class. Lin Xiao said that even a magician himself could not accurately determine his magic level, let alone that others could determine it. A mage can only get a vague idea of an opponent's true strength if more than 3 levels separate them, even though this can be a little problematic before a fight. In other words, even if the opponent is going up against a magician who is 3 levels higher than himself, who can easily crush him with his strong magic, both of them will be very nervous before the battle begins. Alina put in her 2 cents about the fact that this is all because people have too weak perception skills. Rosie, who was standing in the crowd, turned back and saw a couple standing near a tree, but she was again distracted by the teacher, who said that their trials would begin right away, and they will start with Miss Ren. They don't need to panic at all. You just need to do as they did in practice. The girl waved her wand, told the water fairy to turn into a silver blade and attack with her dance. Alina watched this from afar and said that this girl is in a trial right now. She is only in the beginning stage of the 2nd level, and therefore using the ice cone might be a bit too much for her. It was very weak. When the girl experienced the attack, Lin Xiao admitted that Alina was right. Vladica noticed that people still rely on such things. It's not convenient at all. Magic measuring gentleman, used to measure the level of magic of the caster. The teacher thought, and then called the next student, and it turned out to be none other than Caesar. The guy stepped forward and ordered to light an eternal flame and an eternally red lotus. There were flashes of bright flame everywhere, which ignited. Sovereign realized that this was the 3rd entry level, and besides Lin Xiao, this blonde was the strongest in the class. Apprentices around were delighted with the power of Caesar. Admiring whispers were heard everywhere. Someone did not understand where he got so much power. He is very lucky that he can control her. Then Rosie came out. The girl stepped forward, grinned, and fired an arrow of light forward. However, the old man immediately shouted that her angle was wrong, and because Lai did not hit the target. As long as the arrow was flying at Lin Xiao, the demon lord standing behind him didn't care at all. Apparently, aiming the beam out of the way was Rosie's plan, because she smiled slyly and promised the guy to take care of his medical bills. But mentally, of course, the blonde decided not to tempt fate and moved away while the guy thought that he had no other choice. The guy snapped his fingers and there were 2 loud explosions. Everything was full of smoke, and the guy cleared his throat, asking Miss Rose if she was trying to kill someone. The girl gasped and asked the guy if he was okay. Her eyes were feignedly frightened. The old man ran up to Lin Xiao and asked him to let the man look at his wounds. But the guy scratched his musty and said that he was alright. He was simply unlucky. But luckily, Rosie's attack went out of control and self-destructed halfway through. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten off so easy. The man began to reproach himself and say that it is all his fault that he did not follow. He is responsible for all the students who get injured, and therefore now he will heal the guy. Rosie was really scared, so she apologized to the guy and said that she was very glad that he was completely fine. But the guy really managed to dodge. The teacher remarked that, fortunately, Lin Xiao only scorched the uniform. She should be more careful next time. And since everything is in order, they need to continue testing. The next hours were tested, and eventually it was Lin Xiao's turn. He stepped forward to the next whispers about what many rumors about his strength. Now everyone can finally see him in action. The guy summoned a fireball and eventually passed the test. Well, who would have doubted? The onlookers admired his strength, and the maid stood aside, bored. She looked at the guy for a very long time, walked around him, not tearing off her heads, and in the end the guy could not stand such pressure and asked why she was looking at him so intently. It's very stressful. The blonde asked if he knew how to use magic instantly, and the guy was shocked. How did she know that? He was clearly casting a spell during the test. Alina said that obviously Rosie had full control over her spell, and the guy was just using stronger magic to deflect the attack. He just snapped his fingers. Isn't that instant magic? Lin said that she had been watching quite closely, but that he almost got blown away, and someone left pretty quickly. The maid said that the contract says that she cannot harm her master, but it says nothing about the need to protect him. The guy just yelled at that. After a while, the teacher announced that the tests were over and all students could go. Alina recalled that instant magic could only be used by magicians of the 6th level or higher. The guy really managed to learn this trick at the 4th level. In 10 years, Lin Xiao will become one of the greatest magicians in the human world. The girl was so thoughtful that she did not see the blonde in front of her, with whom she hit her forehead in the back. She yelled at him why he stopped so suddenly in the middle of the road. Lin turned around and apologized. He just wanted to ask if chicken legs are good for dinner. Since the chicken legs, it looks like the Lord has no other choice and she will eat them with the guy. She started dragging the guy too fast behind her. He asked not to rush so much, and it is obvious that she wants to eat all the chicken legs so much. The Lord was angry. Who even likes to eat those chicken legs? She will definitely kill him someday. Later, at the Laurent Academy, there was noise and din on the training ground. The students were talking until the teacher hit the oar with all his might with his staff. He ordered all the students to calm down and said that all the students who gathered in the square today are those who have passed the tests. And in today's combat training, they will go to the Black Lake Forest to destroy the werewolves that threaten the villagers. Therefore, they all need to prepare well, because soon they will be moving forward. After a while, Lin Xiao and Alina stood near the carriages, and the girl said that people are exactly like splinters in one place. The guy promised to treat her with chicken legs after training, so long as she doesn't go too hard. In the meantime, Rosie darted under the arm of Caesar and asked him to ride with her in the same carriage. The guy was confused at first, but eventually agreed, as if he was forced. The teacher checked whether all the students were ready to go and ordered them to move towards the forest of the Black Lake. At this time, outside the West Wind village, the barefoot girl was in charge of the forest with the thought that Alina was still waiting for her, so she should run quickly. But people with weapons shone on her way, and she only clicked at the sight of them. The girl's name was Alona. She was related to the upper-class demons. Something flew past her and hit her face. Now there was a small wound under her eye. Opposite her was an army in heavy armor, and the man who stood in front said that they needed to find out how far this demon could go. Alona yelled that humans are a pain in the ass, and then she summoned a one-eyed black cat, who yelled that you need to hurry up and prepare the seal. There were screams and strange actions everywhere. The knights shouted that they could not block it. The black cat inspired fear even in the most courageous men. Suddenly, a girl with blue hair appeared in front of them. She was blindfolded with a white bandage. This girl turned out to be the Holy Maiden of the Holy Church, Zuer, and called Alona a too naughty cat. The joke is not to come closer to her, but the Holy Virgin folded her hands together and asked if the cat was scared of her. The girl in response shouted that she was not afraid of the maiden, but she screamed and said that Alina deserves punishment for such disobedience. Alona fell and doubled over as the maiden kept telling this beautiful kitty that she wasn't going to be rough with her. With the last of her strength, the elephant held on while the Holy Maiden drew some strange patterns and a blue circle in the air. The Holy Maiden of the Holy Church directed a blue circle at Alona's head and asked what her purpose was. The girl screamed in response that she would not tell her anything, but she herself could hardly endure the pain. The blue-haired girl ingratiatingly asked the little cat to tell her goal, and then the maiden would let her go. Alona looked up at her with her eyes full of tears and pain and asked if she would really let her go. And having received a positive answer, she said that she was heading to the city of Neverwinter. The maiden asked what she was going to do there and if the Demon King was there now. The kitty, barely holding back her sobs, asked how the maiden knew all this, and she said that she misunderstood her and that everything is not as she thinks. The Holy Maiden said it was very nice, but she doesn't even know how to lie properly. Alona cursed this snow witch and promised herself that she would definitely take revenge and kill her. The maiden grinned and asked the kitten not to get angry. Didn't she say she'd let her go? She is ready to let her go, but she wonders if the Imperial Cross Guards will do the same. Whether she will run away from them will be the envy of her abilities. And because the little cat should not give up, she must live on. The guards all shouted and shouted at this demon spawn to die, but Alona only whispered something about the cross of the Imperial Guard. Black Lake Forest is a jungle in the Kingdom of Lombard. It takes its name from the strange black lake lurking in its depths. For many years a deadly miasma oozes from the lake. Monsters thrive in such an environment. Horses and carriages raced at full speed along the dusty road. In one of these carriages sat Lin Xiao and Alina. The guy was too gloomy and thoughtful. He thought for a long time what to do. He blamed Alina and her long tongue for everything. And why did she only agree to fight for him? The guy was so angry that it could be seen from his expression, and the demon lord could not stand it, and in the end asked what was happening to him. The guy sighed heavily and came to the conclusion that by blaming the blonde, he would not achieve anything in the end. And when the girl asked if it was because of the duel, it was all by chance. He only mumbled sullenly in response. The demon lord really didn't understand why he was so worried about it. He's much stronger than that man. The guy quoted that the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. He doesn't want to deal with any of that, and he doesn't want to be cannon fodder on the battlefield. Caesar is more suited to this heroic work. Imagining a hot brunette and a glass of red wine beside him, the guy said that he dreams of living a good life as a backup hero. Alina did not share his admiration for being a backup hero. How is that even possible? When a hero dies, the backup hero immediately becomes the new hero. He will receive a level of conversion that is second only to the hero. They do not have any actual powers, but not only are they not required to fight, their way of life is fully supported using tax money. So, this is what Lin Xiao calls the dream life. The girl had nothing to say to that as the blonde continued to speak. He would definitely fix the problem with their contract and then send the demon lord back to the forest of the end. But in return, she must remain silent about his true power. During the conversation, their faces were too close to each other, and the girl pushed his face behind her cheek, saying that she understood everything. Some strange feeling of anxiety settled inside her chest. She clung to the seat on which she sat before and turned her head around. Lin Xiao noticed this and asked if she had discovered something strange. The horse suddenly braked sharply, and the carriage almost stood on its side. All those who were in it barely managed to stay in their places from such a strong push. Outside, the growls of the wolves were suddenly heard, which seriously frightened everyone. Rossi immediately began to seek shelter in the hands of Caesar, who behaved like a hero and told everyone to remain calm and stay in their places, and never go outside. A fireball was burning in his hands, which he prepared to protect the students and himself. Rossi did the same, and fireballs flew at the dogs. Rejoiced at such an easy and quick victory over the predators, the girl began to jump on the spot. But she was greatly mistaken, because the animals were not yet destroyed. The predator was running at full speed towards them, and Caesar again had to use the fireball spell. Surprisingly, Lin Xiao also came to the rescue, thanks to whom everything went smoothly and quickly. He arrived just at the very last moment. Caesar thanked him, and Lin Xiao asked the captain what they should do now. Caesar ordered everyone to prepare their fireballs, and all the other students lined up to use their powers. They invoked fire, spirits of fire, and so on. Such a strong, powerful wave of fire hit the wolves while the teacher, Sir Wu Zai, and another man, who asked the old man if they needed to help the students, watched everything. However, Wu Zai replied that there was no need for that. They handle it very well without her help either. The demonic wolves that attacked them were just low-level beasts. Students will get real combat experience by fighting against them. But the next will be werewolves. They are much more vicious than these demonic wolves. Suddenly, Master Wu Zai noticed a girl running not far from him. It was Alina, who was thinking that Lin Xiao was too far away from her. Alina suddenly heard that a demonic wolf was attacking her from behind. Seeing this, the teacher called out to the maid Lin Xiao to be careful, but it was already too late because the wolf was practically near her. When Alina looked into the predator's eyes, for some reason he immediately whined like a puppy. Then he completely trembled all over and ran away in the other direction from the girl. Soon, Alina continued to run and curse the stupid Lin Xiao under Master Zai's dumbfounded gaze. What was it all about now? Is that girl okay? Meanwhile, Lin Xiao used a fireball, shooting it at the demonic wolf, when a breathless demon lord ran up to him. The guy asked why she came to the battlefield. Did he tell her to stay in the carriage? The girl suddenly started screaming that they humans have memories like goldfish, or something like that. The guy must have forgotten about their contract altogether. Lin recalled that the contract said that the maid should follow her master, so, prizes that he really forgot about it. The young man apologized. Alina said that with his true strength, he could just get rid of those low-level demons on his own. Lin Xiao abruptly stopped his actions and covered the girl's mouth with his hand, ordering her to be quiet. Had she forgotten her promise to him? Then he grabbed her sharply by the arm and dragged her to the side where no one would see them, and then they could talk. Running so fast made the poor lord dizzy, and the guy said he only wanted to level up for his goal as a backup hero, otherwise he wouldn't have played with those guys. Alina had no answer to this, and the next second she felt a stranger on her hand, which grabbed her sharply. The guy repelled the fireball, and then ordered the girl to be a little good maid and stay behind him. But the girl was stubborn and stated that she had never said before that she needed someone's protection. The guy raised his hand and asked Alina not to be like that. He should protect her because of her abilities that she has and because of his rating. The girl just chuckled at that. At this time, Caesar took out his sword and began to wave it in front of the wolves. Alina said that this magical swordsman has very good prospects, judging by the way Caesar handles his sword. Lin Xiao noticed that being able to learn magic and martial arts is impressive, but doing it at the same time is just torture. It seems that Caesar is a masochist. Alina suddenly turned and glared at him sullenly. Who would speak at all? The guy thinks he's about average. The perfect combination of genius and magic. Genius is not so simple. The guy replied saying, yes, it really is not very simple. What, is she interested in him? Lin Xiao will definitely talk to her about this as soon as there is time. The demonic ox walked closer, but then it just passed by Lin Xiao, which surprised him a lot. All the wolves suddenly ran towards Caesar. Was he really the target of the Wolf King? The guy pushed off the ground at the same time as the animal, but in the next second, Caesar cut the wolf in half. It was very bloodthirsty. All the students who were standing around started praising Caesar for being so cool and brave. He is so strong and merciless that he is an idol for everyone. The crowd shouted his name as Caesar himself looked directly into Lin Xiao's eyes. Meanwhile, in the forest, the guards trapped Ilona, who collapsed to the ground with a groan. She was desperately trying to fight for her life, because there was no way she could die in this place like that. Something suddenly came to her mind. She decided to break through the trap, but she was forcefully thrown back. There was a strong knock and traces of blood, and the girl sadly noticed that all her mana had ended. One of the guards shouted to the others that the demon spawn was about to flee, and Ilona rushed towards the dense forest. A chase immediately formed behind her, but they were stopped by the voice of the Holy Virgin, who ordered not to chase the girl, all because they will definitely meet this kitten. The girl ran through the dark forest, wounded and sad. She was holding her hand. The demonic seal turned out to be extremely powerful, but why did it have a chance at such a critical moment? Is it possible that the Snow Witch decided to let her go? No, it's just impossible. That damned witch almost killed the poor girl. Ilona grabbed her head with one hand because it hurt like hell and was spinning. Then the girl felt that she could no longer move, which was rather strange. And then she fell to the ground with a loud crash. A wolf sat in the shade of a tree, leaning on a sword stuck in the ground. He noticed the fallen girl and got up from his seat to come closer to her. The girl was shaking and trembling. She spotted the werewolf and whispered to hurry. The werewolf, meanwhile, began to sniff her intently, and when Ilona asked him for help, he quickly took her on his huge paws and ran, while howling loudly at the moon. At this time, the Net Witch stood in front of her army of guards and praised them from the spirit. One of them knelt in front of her highness on one knee and said that they were sincerely sorry that they did not live up to her and Mr. Bayer's expectations. The girl asked not to talk like that anymore, because they all did their best. It is possible that their miss was the will of the goddess of fate. Now, they have to go back because Mr. Bayer is already tired of waiting. When the witch began to pass through the army, whispers were heard from the men that she was just a child. So how did she even manage to become so domineering and powerful? Another asked what they were whispering about. It was because of her highness's strategy that they were able to successfully create a demonic capture field. Don't they know that many people have nicknamed her the Snow Queen? She's just a child. Hearing this, the girl approached one of the men and asked what he had just said. The guy fell on his knees in front of her and said that he called her a snow witch, and he asked for forgiveness because he was wrong. He was really sorry. Then the girl called the captain, who stood nearby and was always ready to fulfill any of her orders. The girl ordered that the man be killed, and the captain readily began to carry out the order. The man suddenly started screaming and asked the girl why she wants to kill him for the truth. She's just a blind witch, and she's way too arrogant. And for this, the goddess of light will punish her. The girl touched her blindfold and said that it looked like she would have to clarify something with that man before he died. She asked the captain what punishment awaits those who run away from the battlefield, and he replied that those who betrayed their comrades to her highness would be considered rebels of the church, and they would be punished by God. The demonic capture field they had set up yesterday opened a gap, and at the most inopportune moment, the demonic spawn escaped. The man was pressed to the ground and told that there is only one person who escaped from the battlefield and everyone must know who it is. By going against God, they abandoned their mission. They brought disaster on themselves, and on behalf of the goddess of light, the Holy Virgin sentences the man to death. The man screamed that he didn't want to die just like that at the moment when he said those nasty words. He just lost his mind. Someone must have used dark magic on him, and it was the Snow Witch. She was the one who used dark magic on him. The man was sure of it. The rest of the guards were talking on the sidelines. The cretin who was sent to death must not realize at all that he was the reason the demon spawn escaped. Maybe the princess is blind, but her pure heart is able to feel all evil through and through. The men began to shout, "Long live her highness! Long live her highness!" The girl, meanwhile, told the suicide bomber that she simply could not stand people like him, who changed their minds about others too quickly. And if his will was strong, then how would her dark magic affect him? After a while, the guardsman bowed to the girl and said that the traitor was finished, and the Snow Witch thanked the captain for his hard work. As she was about to leave, the blue-haired girl suddenly added that she had heard that the Laurent Academy's hunting team was located north of the forests. The captain confirmed her guesses and reported that the great wizard led his new students to hunt werewolves. The girl said that she understood everything and now it's time for them to go back. She was completely sure that she would meet her cute little kitten again, otherwise everything she had done would be in vain. And she asked Lin Xiao not to sit on her, because she does all this only for his sake. Meanwhile, on the northern side of the forest, where it was already dark and only bright stars shone in the night sky, there were many yellow tents of the same type on the ground in the forest. Lin Xiao sat on the grass near the fire and sneezed constantly. He must have caught a cold. Sitting next to him was his teacher, who asked the guy if he listened to him at all. He let the boy take his maid with him, so the boy must protect her. So why the hell is he letting her run back and forth in the middle of a fight then? Wiping the snot under his nose, the guy thought that it was not that he even wanted to take her with him. At this time, Alina stood on the sidelines and giggled maliciously. A little later, Lin Xiao looked into the tent where the demon lord was sitting. When he pulled the tent curtain aside, the girl put down her cloak. The guy was surprised by this, because she did it even without his reminder. What a good girl. Alina thought he was a pervert, while the guy said that this maid outfit suits her very well. And he was completely sure that she liked him very much too. The girl abruptly turned around and Lin Xiao couldn't understand if she was angry with him again. Without a word, Alina threw her brown cloak over the sewing again and immediately ran out of the tent into the street. She suddenly screamed that this place was very dangerous, and the guy after her asked what she had found there again. Lin Xiao noticed that a fireball was flying at him and managed to dodge in time. The ball flew straight into the tent, and it immediately flared up with a bright fire. He just got lucky with such a good reaction. When the fire began to spread to other tents as well, Lin Xiao reproachfully looked at the sovereign, who assured that everything that was happening was in no way related to her. Surprisingly, the young man did not argue, because he was sure that this was not her doing. They suddenly sharply turned their bright heads towards the forest, from where a pack of werewolves was looking at them at the head of the main one that had saved the girl earlier. At first, the students did not understand who they were. They thought what kind of strange creatures with the head of a dog, and even with bats in their hands. Others recognized a pack of werewolves in the unwanted guests. Suddenly, everyone gave into panic and began to scatter in different directions around the camp and call for help from their teachers. The werewolves howled at the great full moon in their customary fashion and returned their gazes to the humans running about in confusion. Lin Xiao suddenly said that if he destroys them and then gives them to the teachers, then the S rating will be completely his. And it may be that he will be able to return home before the rest and enjoy the beautiful scenery or play with Alina. The young man erected in front of him a large patterned orange circle as if from fire, and asked the werewolves, politely, that they die for his happy life. The blonde summoned an explosive flame and threw it towards the beasts. These dog heads will definitely get a full star. The werewolves growled in response. When the young man was about to launch a fireball at the wolves, Alina sharply grabbed his hand. She said that she had already told him that they weren't dog heads, but werewolves. Lin Xiao was not happy about being interrupted again and became angry. Doesn't she know that once a spell is cast, it can't be interrupted? Is she trying to kill him? Alina grinned and asked, "What is it so afraid of? He still won't die." Lin yelled in her ear that even if he was strong, she shouldn't make things difficult for him on purpose. The demon lord shouldn't give him any trouble. A wolf roared behind him, and Lin Xiao turned around sharply. Damn it, now he will not be able to destroy them with one spell. There is only one thing left, to run as fast as he can. The demon lord did not understand what he was afraid of. It's just a bunch of low-level critters. The blonde stepped forward and stood directly in front of a pack of werewolves. Lin Xiao tried to stop her, but the girl did not hear him and ordered the werewolves to leave immediately. She stood straight nose to one werewolf, and then they all began to scatter in different directions. Lin could not understand what she had done, but the maid only replied that she simply told them to get away. The young man leaned over to Alina's ear and covered her ear with his palm, as if he was about to find out a big secret. And then he asked if this was a special skill of the Demon Lord. Alina said no. The entire high-level demon bloodline has the power to command demonic beings. That's why they are called high-level demons. The girl asked if the teachers didn't tell the students about it. In fact, during the theory class, Lin Xiao just slept soundly on his arms folded on the desk, because he doesn't know the theory very well. But, of course, he hardly admitted this, and awkwardly scratching the back of his head, only said that he had not heard this particular information. The guy looked sideways and realized that there were still quite a lot of werewolves, and what should they do in this case? Alina took the guy's hand off her shoulder and replied that she had no idea what their future plan would be. After some time, a couple were surrounded by a pack of werewolves, and then Lin Xiao, despite all the cries of Alina, grabbed her in an armful. The girl demanded to let her go immediately, but the blonde assured that it seemed to him that if he let her go from his hands, they would immediately die. It seemed to Vladika that his playful hands were moving in the wrong place, and in the end, she ordered the guy to immediately let her go. At this time, real chaos reigned on the other side of the camp. The students were annoyed that all their clothes and other belongings were left in the tents, which burned to the ground. Some even had their hair burned. 2 teachers stood aside, and the younger one, with black hair and strange sideburns, turned to Wu Zai and said that there were not enough students in the camp and they needed to be urgently found and rescued. The old man told Momu that he needed a little time to figure everything out, while the man would look after the students for now. In response, Momu asked the strings not to worry, because he would definitely not let these werewolves get through. At this time, Wu Zai was summoning a magical shield. It was large and glowed with a bright blue light. Then he began to speak other spells: light, pure light in the sky, blazing hot light, shining invisible light, light of the souls of everything. Double cast. After completing the main spell and saving the loop structure, you need to start the spell a second time. After that, she will become twice as strong. This is a type of magic that only magicians above the 6th level can wield. Some kid is running away from an evil werewolf and screaming for help. And then the old man began to act faster. He began to conjure so that evil would turn into light and create a shield. Then everything around was lit up with a bright yellow light, and the old man asked Momu if there were any more missing students. Among those caught were Lin Xiao, Rosi, and Caesar. Wu Sil made some strange sounds and ordered the man to leave this place to him. And Sir Momu must hurry to find the missing and return them to their place. These 3 students are the hope of the entire Laurent Academy. Therefore, they must all return safe and sound. And especially Caesar, because he is a prince. Meanwhile, in the thick of the forest, someone called for help. From the wounded arm of Caesar, who was sitting leaning against a tree, thick blood dripped. The young man endured the pain in his arm through his teeth, while Rosi, who was sitting next to him, raved about the fact that they were all going to die here. Not far from them, werewolves appeared, who prowled here and there, and therefore Caesar put his hand over the girl's mouth and ordered her to be silent. Otherwise they would be eaten alive. In her mind, Pink Hair thought that Caesar had hurt himself because of her, when his hand was bitten by the old werewolf fangs. She apologized to him, shedding hot tears. The guy didn't like these snot, and he ordered the girl to stop running a circus here. All she knows is to apologize. Rosi wanted to say something else, but the wolves kept getting closer and she covered her mouth with her own hands. Caesar, holding his sword on his head, stood up and told the girl to leave her apologies until they returned to the camp. Rosi shook and mumbled that they would probably never get out of here, but the blonde was sure it was too soon to give up. If they can break through, then they will have at least a shred of hope. And if they die here, that means they're just not strong enough. But he is still alive. He wants to be a warrior, a hero. And that's why he can't just die here. When the wolves stopped waiting and eventually attacked, Caesar began swinging his sword from side to side. As he fought, Rosi wondered if Caesar was as scared as she was right now. He knows for a fact that he can't defeat them, and yet he fights them alone. When one of the wolves tried to attack the guy from behind, he was overcome by a fireball that the girl called on. Did they think to set a trap for her, Caesar? The girl approached the guy, apologized again, and said that now she would not pull him back. Even if they die today, they will die together. The boy pulled his hand out of her grasp, his cheeks flushed, and he asked what she was talking about. He definitely doesn't want to die here with her. He wants to live. Then Rosi put her hands on her hips and called the guy a real idiot. All because he does not understand women's hearts at all. The guy said that she could cover him, using weak magic to make it difficult for those demonic wolves to move. To which Pink Hair said that they should only surpass together. Did the guy see the light from the main camp? Most likely, this is a magic shield cast by Sir Wu Zai, and therefore the camp is safe, so teachers will definitely come to save them. Caesar, to his surprise, agreed with the girl's thought and said that she was right. The more noise they make, the easier it will be for teachers to find them. They must stay on their feet until help comes for them. At this time, Lin Xiao and Alina stood in bondage, and behind them was the light from the camp. The guy asked what it was it really a forest fire? Or maybe a meteor? The blonde called him an idiot and said that there were people who were attacked by werewolves. Didn't he see the werewolves running in that direction? The guy asked if they were from Luo Lang Academy by chance, and the girl answered about 2-3 level magicians. They are weak, so most likely. Lin Xiao rushed to the other side, once again pulling Alina in tow. This was, by the way, the third time. The guy justified this by the fact that they urgently need help. Suddenly, the guy stopped, and Alina crashed into him again. He remembered that he was very bad at directions, so he asked the demon lord to use his radar power to find where they were. The girl solemnly said that they need to move 600 meters to the east. As soon as she said that, Lin Xiao rushed from his seat and said that they had to hurry to save their comrades. The maid called him an idiot. At the same time, Rosie and Caesar were trying to fight the wolves. They must somehow get rid of the other two, and then they will have a chance to escape. Caesar ordered Rosie to use an ice spear so she could cover him with it. But after several responses, the guy did not wait for her answer. One of the wolves was about to attack the guy, but suddenly a fireball swept past him, knocking the wolf aside. Behind them were Lin Xiao and his maid. They asked if the guy was okay, but Caesar just sat on the ground. Lin Xiao asked the breeze to transform into deadly blades and dance with everyone. And then one of the wolves was overcome by a blue light. Now there is only one werewolf left. Lin thought that he could not reveal his power under Caesar, so he needed to use a weak spell to get rid of them. The young man could not understand why there were still so many werewolves. It felt as if their number hadn't diminished at all. Realizing that there was no other choice, the guy ordered to light this unquenchable fire, turn into a fiery projectile and pierce the enemy through and through. With one blow, the guy was lucky to take out 2 wolves at once, and exhaled with relief that he did not seem to reveal his strength. Lin Xiao approached Caesar, who had been sitting on the ground all this time, and asked if he was okay. He jumped to his feet, grabbed the blonde by the shoulders, and, with desperation in his eyes and voice, said that Rosie was missing. Lin Xiao couldn't believe what he was hearing. At this time, poor Rosie was being dragged on his big shoulder by a werewolf. When she demanded to let her go, the wolf simply threw the girl to the ground, which provided her with not the softest landing. She quickly jumped to her feet in an attempt to escape, but the werewolf wasn't easily fooled, so he grabbed her leg. Rosie tried to summon a flame, but the werewolf quickly hit her with his powerful paw. Then he grabbed her with his sharp claws, and the poor girl could not understand what he was doing. He licked her face with his long, slippery tongue as pink hair screamed and called for help. Finally, her prayers were answered because Lin Xiao called out to the doghead. He ordered the beast to remove its vile dirty paws from the girl and threw a fireball at it. The werewolf growled in response. Lin Xiao thought with a sigh that he would have killed him earlier if it wasn't for Rosie. Everywhere other werewolves began to run. Lin Xiao thought it was the perfect timing to get rid of 2 werewolves in one go. He threw several fireballs and yelled for them to die. Then everyone ran up to Rosie and asked if she was okay. The girl fell to the ground, and Lin believed that she had overcome her fear of werewolves. But standing a little behind Alina said that most likely she just lost consciousness because of him. Lin Xiao put the girl on his shoulder and asked the maid not to joke anymore. The teachers have probably already found Caesar, so they need to hurry. When the guy with Rosie on his shoulder was already moving away, Alina stood still for a while. She suddenly smelled a crimson-eyed black cat. But what did she forget in a place like this? Or maybe she just imagines all this. Lin Xiao turned around and asked what was wrong, but the stubborn demon lord said that everything was fine and they had to go. Meanwhile, Momu entered the camp with Caesar on his shoulder, and the old man shouted that he urgently needed help. Lin Xiao was puffing out of the forest because Rosie was quite heavy. Master Wu Zai was glad that they were finally back and asked where they had been for so long because Caesar and Rosie were injured. The young man replied that they were separated when the camp was ambushed by werewolves, and then they ran into Caesar when he was pinned down and rescued him, escaping further. The man considered this story complete nonsense, because the guy's clothes were all clean. It doesn't look like he fought at all. The guy in response only awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that it was because they were lucky. In the end, surrendering, the man said that it was still good that they returned safe, and now they must go to the camp and restore their strength. A few days later, in Sir Wu Zai's tent, he sat at a wooden table while the students stood in front of him. He said that during the ambush of the werewolves, they performed very well, and after discussion, he and the teachers decided to give the students an rating early. And now they can rest. Caesar did not agree with something and was about to object, but the teacher interrupted him and did not let him finish. Wu Zai drew the boy's attention to his wound on his arm. His hand will become useless if he continues like this. Therefore, they must rest well, and his words are not discussed in any way. When the students left the tent, Rosie called out to the Caesars ahead of them, who did not stop. Lin Xiao said that he knew that he wanted to get an S rank, and then the layer guy turned around and asked what to do then. Lin Xiao was very enthusiastic and gave a thumbs up and said that they have a lot of opportunities. For example, to find and defeat the werewolf king. Caesar didn't like the plan. It's easy to say. Sir Momu spent several days and could not find him, so how can they do it? Lin Xiao, however, said that there was no need to rush because he had everything necessary for this. He took out a roll of paper, and Caesar was surprised that it was a map of the Black Lake Forest. The red mark on it meant the lair of the werewolves. Caesar asked where Lin Xiao got this map from, and he replied that 2 days ago, he and Alina were walking in the area and found a bunch of dead soldiers in the forest. Most likely, they, too, were ambushed by werewolves, and therefore they found this map from those same soldiers. In fact, the last few days there was nothing to do, and Lin Xiao asked Alina to order the defenders to show the way to their lair. And then he took out the skin of a wolf and drew a map. They can't miss this chance because it's the perfect opportunity for an S rating. In the end, after a long silence, Lin asked if they were coming with them or not, and Caesar said that he was coming. Rosie also said that she was coming, because Caesar's wounds had not yet completely healed, so she would be happy to help him. After a while, a bunch of guys were standing in the forest, and then Rosie suddenly said sharply that it was understandable why they were going to look for the werewolf lair. But why did Lin Xiao take his maid with him? What if she suddenly gets hurt? Lin Xiao hugged Alina and said that his maid is very sad if she is too far away from him. So she should not worry about this, he will always be able to protect her. Caesar suddenly ordered everyone to be quiet because they had arrived at the scene. They stood near a huge black lake. The bright moon reflected in the water. Lin Xiao told the demon lord that it was time for her introduction. The werewolf king should be very close, so you need to be very careful. Lin told Alina that she should stay close to him. How well they played their roles in front of the guys. Suddenly, the blonde turned and noticed that Alina had suddenly disappeared. Rosie joined in, too, and began to turn her head back and forth. Poke a couple of seconds, Alina called for help. Alina pretended to call for help as the werewolf stood behind her. Lin Xiao knows how to get Caesar to duel. Demon Lord can control monsters, so let the show begin. Alina was adamant and told the guy not to even think about it, but he promised to buy her more chicken legs when they met. Alina was angry with herself for selling herself so easily for some chicken legs. The king of houses is actually listening to the shuttle's nonsense. Lin Xiao is a fool. As the girl kept calling for help, Lin Xiao told her that she should put more effort into her acting. As a result, Lin wanted to rush to the aid of his maid, but Caesar grabbed his hand and asked the guy not to be so reckless. There are a lot of werewolves around, and this will be his grave. The guy was adamant and said that he must definitely save his maid. If he cannot even protect her, then he cannot consider himself a full-fledged man. Caesar was very annoyed and said that they would definitely save Alina. Last time he couldn't protect Rosie, so this time he won't let that happen again. Rosie suddenly called out that she would run with them. Another fireball flew at the werewolf. Caesar waved his sword until the ox pulled out his huge club. Rosie began to summon cold-blooded ice to freeze all of her enemies. Suddenly, a log flew into her, but Caesar easily threw it away. Before them appeared a huge wolf in a beautiful robe and with a large sword. He growled hard. The guys were glad that the king of werewolves finally came to them. They called upon an unquenchable flame to transform into a red lotus like a projectile. The werewolf was attacked. His armor has resistance against explosions, so the fireballs were useless. Suddenly, Caesar ordered everyone to step aside and held the huge werewolf sword with his sword, preventing himself from being killed. The guys tried to help him from afar, and suddenly the werewolf hit the guy very hard. Rosie was immediately worried, and when the barely alive Caesar was helped to his feet, he realized with annoyance that magic was useless against this monster. Lin Xiao suddenly had an idea, but Caesar said that magic doesn't do any damage, so what idea could he have? The blonde has a secret trick to deal with him. Had they all forgotten that he was from the Dong Xiaoyi clan? The guy asked Caesar to buy him some time, and he began to fulfill the request. Rosie told Lin Xiao that he had better come with something really good. She created a bright shield and summoned the spirits of nature. The werewolf continued to growl as the poor girl was thrown back by a powerful wave. He was about to throw himself at Lin Xiao, but Caesar told the werewolf that a scum like him should not dare to interrupt Lin Xiao. Caesar was hit again as Lin continued to create a shield and summon fire spirits. Only after some time the guys realized that the guy was doing a double cast. It was very unexpected, and as a result, a huge werewolf simply froze. Caesar rushed at him with a sword and wanted to cut his head in half, but only broke the ice shell, and the wolf was back in business. Lin Xiao ordered the Red Lotus fairies to release the power of the Red Lotus. Everything around was on fire. The werewolf tried to fight. Rosie sat on the ground and thought that Lin Xiao could indeed use a dual cast that only magicians of the 6th level and above could use. What was this terrifying secret magic of the Dong Xiao clan? Later, there was a very powerful explosion and Lin Xiao could barely stand on his feet, but Caesar picked him up in time and asked if he was okay. The blonde replied that it was okay. He just forcibly used secret magic and now he can't use magic for a while. Caesar belligerently said that while the guy was recovering, he would protect him. Lin Xiao thought that the guy was obviously straightforward, and why did he sound so strange when he said that? Lin Xiao said that he would not be able to recover for about a month, and then what should they do with the duel? Caesar ordered the guy to forget about this stupid duel. In the end they would just cancel it, that's all. The boy leaned back on the grass and thanked his comrade for his understanding. He was so tired. In his heart, Lin was jubilant, because his plan was a success and now this damn duel is called off. To the fact that the guy was tired, Caesar responded in the same way. They all sat very downcast and tired, until Alina stepped on Lin Xiao and ordered them to hurry up. He should get up and stop pretending to be a corpse. Bona did not expect this and grabbed his cheek. What is she even doing? He's spent so much mana, can't she give him some rest? Alina, however, knew that the guy was bluffing, because she was completely sure that he was fine. He used little mana and is way too far from being depleted. At this, Lin Xiao awkwardly scratched the back of his head and asked if she was standing somewhere nearby. The demon lord really thought the boy was an idiot. Well, where else could she be? Is he again? Forgot that she can't go far away from him. The guy feigned a yawn and said that he forgot about it again. So, why did she wake him up at all? He wanted to take a nap. The blonde said that the obligatory rule for using a double cast is to reach the 6th level of mana. Those who attempt to force use it without reaching the required mana level will receive heavy mental pressure and die. And the guy is determined to be level 4, so how could he double cast without dying? The young man replied that his ear could withstand much more than an ordinary person, and these limitations of mana meant nothing to him. The demon lord thought, where does this Lin Xiao come from anyway? Dong Xiao clan is really that powerful. Lin Xiao ran up to Alina and put his arm around Alina's shoulders, and began to say that she was just super despite the fact that her acting is complete rubbish. But somehow his plan worked. Alina suddenly realized that he could finish off the werewolf king with some mediocre magic. So why did he put so much effort into this operation then? The blonde smiled and said that Caesar is an idiot. He blames himself for what happened to Rosie. And if this happened again, then he would have given all his best to save a person. As a son-in-law, all he had to do was find an enemy he couldn't defeat on his own. Then, supposedly with the help of secret magic, defeat him. And so Lin Xiao was able to cancel the duel without revealing his true strength. Alina hissed through her teeth, was this really his clan's secret power? The guy was surprised. What is the secret magic? He was just joking, because he is not even part of this clan. Dong Xiao and this mysterious clan just look like them, so he used that as an excuse. As a result of the conversation, Alina ordered the guy to follow him, despite the fact that it is now the middle of the night, and they are actually in the forest. Soon they approached the base of the werewolf king. The guy did not yet understand why they had come to this place, but the lord said that here she smelled a scarlet-eyed black cat. And in a knowing moment, she saw Alona sleeping peacefully. Lin Xiao grabbed Alina by the arm, but she quickly pulled away and told that idiot not to dare stop her. She bit her finger and then pushed it into the girl's mouth. From the outside, such actions seemed very strange, and therefore the guy still asked what he was doing. Vladika replied that in this way she was treating her. The guy was surprised that the lord could use his blood for this. He's pretty weak too, so let him drink some of her blood too. However, the girl did not appreciate such a joke, called Lin a complete pervert and ordered him to roll away from her. At this time, Alona slowly woke up, and when she opened her eyes, she saw her mistress in front of her. Then she threw herself into Alina's arms and said that she had been looking for her for too long, and she cried aloud. Then she suddenly saw a guy behind her and could not believe that the man had come with Alina. She thought he was hostile, so she let out her fangs and asked what he was up to and what he was doing here. Lin Xiao rushed to Alina and begged to save him from this cat. Alona didn't understand how the guy dared touch Alina. Yes, she will just kill him for it. Trying to jump towards the guy, taking only one step forward, the cat fell face down. She had completely forgotten that all her powers were sealed. Alina went up to the girl, stroked her head, and asked Nana what happened to her. Nana said that she had heard that Mrs. Alina had been sent Neverwinter City, so she came for her from the Forest of the End. She never thought that she would face the cross guard and even fall into the sealing field. But to her mansion article, there was a hole in the field, and she was able to escape, but now she has no strength. Then she encountered some kind of wolf, and he rescued her and brought her to this lair. The guy standing aside could not believe that she came to the werewolves. But Nana continued her story. She saw some strange blue-haired girl. It's all the fault of the blind snow witch. She almost failed to see Mrs. Helena. Lin Xiao was very familiar with the description of this girl. Or did he hear about it? Suddenly Alina realized that someone was coming towards them. Lin Xiao said that it was most likely the teachers because he had left a map for them in the tent. But he did not think that they would come so quickly. Alona's appearance is too dangerous because she is urgently tired of leaving here. And then Vladika asked if he had a plan. Lin Xiao handed the net to the cat, but she did not understand why he was giving her a coin. But Lin Xiao explained that it was not a coin. This is an authentication token. She should head to the city of auspicious snow and find a building with a large cross there. Then, in this building, find a girl named Zuer and just give her this token. And it must also be said that it is Lin Xiao who asks her to bring Alona to Neverwinter. While Alona was staring at the pit, the demon lord suddenly shouted that she would not let Alona go anywhere alone. Alina made it clear that Alona would not leave them. But Lin Xiao disagreed with her and said that now is not the time to be reckless at all. In addition, Alona has lost her mana and her demonic appearance is too noticeable, and so she would definitely be killed if she stayed with them. The Lord asked who this person is Zuer and can she be trusted. Then Lin Xiao asked her not to worry about anything, because she did not hold a grudge against the demon-like. She will definitely take Alona to Neverwinter. Asked Nana if she could get there herself, and she replied that she would do everything without any problems. Saying goodbye to her mistress, the girl ran into the depths of the forest. Meanwhile, the young man hurried Alina because their show is not over yet. At the same time, at the Black Lake, on the shore, there were two teachers, Wu Zai and Momu. They saw Lin Xiao, Rosi, Caesar, and a maid lying near the tree. Since Momu had a rather large physique, he put the unconscious Rosi and Caesar on both of his shoulders. But Wu Zai began to shout loudly at this bunch of parasites. And why can't they just sit in the camp and restore their strength after the last battle? But they needed to run away to beat some kind of werewolf king. Luckily, they just ran out of their mana. What if they got into a really nasty mess? Even Lin Xiao was frightened by such a cry and told Master Wu Zai that he was wrong. But just in case, he left the master a map, plus they had already defeated those werewolves. The man did not answer once and asked how he dared to contradict him. Sooner or later, he will definitely go crazy because of this underage punks. A few days later, at Luo Lion's Academy, students and boys were talking while leaning against the wall. The green-haired lad told two of his friends that he had heard that Caesar was highly praised. He received a magical dragon slayer blade from the headmaster. And he also heard that Caesar and Rosi fought together, and at the cost of completely depleting the mana, they defeated the werewolf king. What else to expect from a goddess and a prince? They are very cool. Not far from them, Lin Xiao passed with his maid. But the guys thought he was a pretender. He was lucky to get high marks only because he grabbed Caesar's legs. Of course, Alina heard their entire conversation. She didn't understand how the guy didn't care what they said about him. However, Lin Xiao stunned her that he was counting on the outcome. Caesar is the one who should become popular. He also received a gift from the director and now he no longer needs to sneak into the ancient library, because he now has the key. He remembered how Rosi, coming out of the headmaster's office, had handed him, who was late, the key to the library. And the director also sent a message for his maid. She said that silver hair and black eyes, as chosen by God, and so they should try to get along. The guy did not understand that the director had these in mind, but he still took the key with him. Although solving riddles is not his forte, he would rather go to study magic in an ancient library. The carriage stopped on the road and first a long leg with a heel appeared from it, and then its owner, the princess of the Han Empire, Meng Dai-ying. It was a sweet, beautiful brunette in an expensive and beautiful outfit. Alina asked Lin Xiao why he only dragged her there. So I wanted to sleep. To this, the guy replied that he had one cool trick from the book that he would like to try. Later, the princess asked the guy if he was really from the Dong Xiao clan. She never thought that she would meet one of her own in this place. A little later, on the training fields, darts were flying all over the place, trying to hit the target. Alina, standing aside all this time, asked Lin Xiao, did he really come here to fool around? The blonde was very relaxed and said he was just warming up. And now it's time for what they came here for. The guy cracked his joints and making sure that there was no one around, he shot a bright light from his hand. He did a multicast, magic shot. However, they did not assume that the same princess was watching them. She was surprised that this young man knew about multicasts. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao was happy about his success, but in the next moment, Alina suddenly jumped up and explosions were heard everywhere. Lin Xiao was lying on the smoking floor, and the sovereign stepped on him with her foot so hard that the poor guy coughed up blood. She was sure he was playing dead again, but it would be better for him to get up off the floor as soon as possible. Lin Xiao jumped to his feet and yelled at Nai. Why didn't she tell him anything when she noticed the problem? Vladica turned her head away and quietly said how she knew where and when the guy would make a mistake. But the guy was adamant. Was sure that Alina was lying, because she jumped aside in advance. And where did he make this mistake? Still not opening her eyes, Alina replied that he had forgotten the intermediate moment, and called him an idiot. Again, the guy tried to multicast again. Magic shot, now knowing about the intermediate moment. The sovereign watched him and was amazed at his true power. For his age, he is truly a genius. The princess around the corner, on the contrary, was horrified by such power. The guy stopped and the maid asked what was wrong. The guy fell to his knees and tried to catch his breath. This is because multicasting consumes too much power. To this, Alina only sarcastically replied that he needed it that way. The princess noted to herself that this young man was quite strong, and left, clicking her heels. But this did not go unnoticed because both Lin Xiao and Alina both turned to the noise and asked who was there. Alina suddenly pulled up strands of their hair, which was rather odd. To be able to hide the owl's presence and get past Alina's detection, someone very interesting seems to show up. As she left, the princess realized to herself that she had just seen a mysterious maid with the ability to detect and a powerful young man from the Dong Xiao clan. It turns out that Luo Lion Academy is not that simple. The girl can't wait to meet them. Lin Xiao was sitting on a chair, stretching and yawning from exhaustion. He spent too much mana yesterday. He should ask for a day off today. But, didn't someone say there was no one around practice? Alina suddenly started acting like a fool and replied that it was because that person knows how to hide his presence, which is why he was able to avoid her detection. The guy asked me to wait until he give this person and shut him up. Master Wu Zai thumped the floor with his staff with all his strength and said that the class hour was starting. And when the class finally quieted down, he said that he thought that for the most part they all already knew that a new student was being transferred to their little magical sect. At this news, the students began to whisper among themselves. Someone has already heard about this, and it is said that the princess of the Qin Empire herself transferred to their school. The guys were beside themselves with joy, because it turns out that she will study with the prince. It's just incredible. There was even a rumor that the princess was the bride of Prince Caesar. Hearing the word, the bride, Rosie, who was sitting apart from everyone, squeezed the glass goblet in her hand so tightly that, unable to withstand the pressure, the poor glass simply burst in her hand. The master, meanwhile, asked Her Highness the princess to enter the classroom. The brunette entered the classroom with dignity, and all the male students were immediately stunned by her incredible beauty, even if she doesn't have such big shapes as Alina, but these gorgeous legs. How sorry the guys were that she was Caesar's bride. The aforementioned only silently sat on the sidelines. The princess introduced herself, said her name and, as expected, asked to be taken care of. This is the first time she's in the Lun Bader realm, and if she suddenly does something or says something wrong, then don't get too angry. The students were pleasantly surprised that the princess was easy to communicate with, and she has an incredibly beautiful name. Even Lin Xiao was blinded by her beauty. Instead of eyes, the guy had solid hearts. It seems he has fallen in love. Alina did not like this reaction. Is he bullying her? The brunette meanwhile walked on her heels to Lin Xiao's desk and clarified his name. The young man's heart thumped loudly until the princess asked him if he would have some free time for her after school. Can he show her around the campus? The guy seemed to hear that he was called on a date. Wiping his nose with a napkin, he stuttered that he was completely free after school. Having received everything she wanted, the princess passed by, not even noticing the maid standing nearby. Finally, Master Wu Zai decided to turn the students' attention to himself and said that before they started their lesson, he had a little announcement. The school will conduct selection tests, and the 2 strongest candidates will participate in the 18th AI Lin School Tournament. Therefore, everyone should prepare for this properly. After class, Lin Xiao walked around the school with a new student, while envious classmates behind his back discussed why he was so lucky. I grabbed a bite right away. It's okay that he has a gorgeous maid, so now the princess likes him too. Caesar or Lin Xiao on good terms. This means that Lin Xiao will not be able to harm his friend's fiancé. At this time, Rosie did not waste time either. She went up to Caesar and coquettishly asked if he would like to have lunch with her. However, the guy turned around from her to another place and said that instead of lunch, he was going to the training field. The girl did not want to give up so easily and ran after the halo, saying that she wanted to go with him. The students all thought that Prince Caesar and Rosie also looked great together, that they are quite a harmonious couple, and that Caesar is a very gifted young man. When Lin Xiao and the princess were outside, the brunette gave out a thought that worried her very much. She could not even imagine that she would ever meet a person from the Dong Xiao clan. Realizing that he might get caught, Lin Xiao tensed up a lot, but still bleated something in response. He had heard that there were not many people from the Dong Xiao clan, and even the royal bench knew their clan members by sight. Maybe the girl somehow figured out his lie. The princess, meanwhile, added that she had never heard of any Lin family until now. The young man began to worry that his lie might soon come out, but the princess suggested that he was most likely from the lost Dong Xiao clan. Lin Xiao didn't know any of Dong Xiao's lost clan, but it was incredibly time that the girl did not guess that he was deceiving her so brazenly. It turns out that hundreds of years ago there was such a strong earthquake that it could destroy an entire continent. It was then that part of the Dong Xiao clan built a new empire called Qin, and the other went to the AI Lin continent. Although they were all from the Dong Xiao clan, later, those who were not citizens of the empire were called the Lost Clan. Lin Xiao thought that a free personality was a huge opportunity for him. Alina all this time stood aside and was angry that she could not catch the smell of this girl. She also does not have any mana wave, and she does not even have the usual smell of a living person either. Was that the girl who was watching them at that training ground? And that idiot Lin Xiao is also good, acts like a real pervert. The princess awkwardly said that she really wanted to ask the guy for something, but this might seem a little rude to the guy. Lin Xiao went out of his way to please her, so he said that she could ask him anything. No longer pulling the cat by the tail, the girl turned to him with her whole body and directly, looking into her eyes, asked why he knew how to use multicast. The young man fell into a kind of stupor from such a question. Suddenly, something flew right next to the couple, from which they bounced off. It was the trinity of Ha Zhai, Hada, Hati, and Lai Ling. The one with the red mohawk on his head and the spiked bat on his shoulder asked his guys if it was Lin Xiao, from the Comb Magic sect, sitting on the bench there. He turned out to be a very lucky guy. A magnificent maid is not enough for him, so he also laid eyes on the princess. Why don't the guys take this wonderful maid for themselves? And the boys laughed wickedly. Suddenly, the princess took out her sword with a graceful handle and began to wave it in front of the faces of the 3 guys, destroying all their weapons. She told them that their words would surely cause displeasure of those around them. They have to get away if they don't want to end up like their weapons. Feeling threatened, the guys quickly turned around and broke in the other direction, offering their deepest apologies for the disturbance. As the princess slid her sword back into its sheath, she returned to Lin Xiao, who was looking at her with goofy eyes. She apologized for asking such a strange question earlier, but it made her feel open around him. The one that she forgot that they just met, and she apologized again. Lin only held out in response that there were no problems. Alina at that time was struck by the movements of the girl, which even she could not clearly see. How strong is this girl? And what goals is she trying to achieve while quickly getting closer to Lin Xiao? Meanwhile, in the city of Zuruki, in front of the Church of Light, Nana was wearing a hood. She was glad that she was finally able to find a building with a large cross. When she went inside, she asked if anyone was inside. There were empty benches everywhere, but she was distracted by the voice of the bishop of Zuruki City, Jasmine. She was a sweet girl with blue eyes and beautiful clothes. She asked the poor miss if everything was alright. Nana said she was looking for a girl named Zuer, and the bishop asked why she was looking for her. Then, Nana replied that Lin Xiao had told her to find Zuer and hand over that half of the token to her, and held out an outstretched hand with the subject of Jasmine. The lovely girl replied that Zuer is not here right now, so could Miss wait for her here until she returns. For some reason, Nana was very happy that she could stay here for a while, and then suddenly very strangely asked if she was a good person. Jasmine smiled warmly and asked the girl not to be afraid. She is the bishop of this place, and she is definitely a very good person. But when the hood on the head of the nano fell on her shoulders and revealed the cat's ears to the light, Jasmine's eyes almost climbed onto her forehead. In the society of demons, high demons differ from demons, beasts of bloodline and intelligence. Among the demonic beasts, there is even a Shivo rating, for they excel in brute strength. But they are brainwashed. They don't see people as enemies until people break into their hiding places. High-level demons stand out the most. They have intelligence, incredible strength, and mystical abilities. They can also control beasts with low intelligence. And among the higher demons there is a clan of black cats with scarlet eyes, possessing destructive power, a huge resistance to magic. They can also turn into humans. However, some of their features still remain. But there are also special cases. All this, Lin Xiao read from his book, with one eye looking at Alina, who loomed right in front of his eyes. Allegra's human form is so perfect it's not even funny. Who would have thought that the ruler who commands the entire demon clan would be his maid? After several peaceful and friendly discussions, Allegra became a good maid. Although she is still poorly managed in the kitchen, it would be great if she was always his maid. Alina could no longer bear Lin Xiao's gaze and asked how long he would stare at her with his animal eyes. What dirty things was he thinking about this time? The guy was a little taken aback by such accusations and said that he just wondered a little if the demons were really the enemies of mankind. Why can't humans and demons exist in harmony? Alina seemed to be blazing with anger. She said that since ancient times, humans and demons have been sworn enemies. Didn't the guy want to change? Lin Xiao asked if they didn't get along well with her. Wouldn't she like it to be like this forever? Putting her hands together in front of her, Alina clarified if he meant to say that she should be his maid all her life. He likes it, doesn't he? Every day to mock the found maid. The blonde wanted to say something, but Alina interrupted him. Why didn't he try to help her then? Yes, it never crossed his mind. He knows nothing about her situation. Lin Xiao objected because he knows absolutely everything about her situation. Alina screamed very loudly. She didn't like the guy exaggerating so much. Every day he does nothing but enjoy life and wait for his death, so what can he even know about it? Lin Xiao quietly asked if there was a rebellion in her family by chance. And if his guesses are true, then Alona is in great danger, and someone from her family wants to kill her. Alina was amazed that the young man knew so much. And how did he know about it? Lin Xiao said that everything is quite simple. He folded it together. Something was missing from the Demon King, but there was no activity in the clan, and only Alona came, and besides, she almost died. And if he is not mistaken anywhere, then someone from her clan is planning an uprising to take the throne. Alina realized that, apparently, Lin Xiao was right from the very beginning. Her allies most likely also guessed this, which is why they drove her into a box. And Alona knew that her mistress was in the ice-free city, so it's quite possible that Nana betrayed her. And Alina will lose, because the rebel owns the Imperial Aura and the army, which she cannot control. The girl was amazed at such accuracy, but still it seemed to her that the guy was lying. He couldn't have known so many details. Therefore, she grabbed Yeager's hair and began to choke, while asking how he knew all this. When Lin Xiao began to wheeze and barely uttered the words that he could not breathe, the girl abruptly loosened her grip and with a guilty face admitted that she simply could not resist. As a result of the conversation, it turned out that she was a demon, and Alina told this freak that it was all his fault, and he lied to her all this time. She's going to kill that damn man. Lin Xiao grabbed her arm tightly and ordered her to retake her bullshit because it was easy to guess. Pod demons are monsters with human souls that are not affected by her imperial soul. They are a bunch of enemies with no weaknesses. Lin had crossed places with the girl, and now he towered over her. But Alina didn't like this alignment, and she quickly prescribed him between his legs, from which the guy's stars began to fly over his head. The guy buried himself in her chest, for which he later received a hard slap in the face. Well, what audacity. He's just a stinky pervert. The next day, at Lulang Academy, Master Wu Zai taught as usual. In the end, Caesar suddenly called Her Highness the Princess. As expected, without having to take command, the haughty prince lost his temper. The princess told Caesar that even though they had just met, he was her fiancé, but still there was no need to be so polite. At first, Caesar did not understand what she was talking about at all. The brunette approached him as close as possible and said that he could simply call her Yin. At this time, Rosie was passing by a couple and, of course, she heard everything. She cursed the princess for her mere existence, because he robs Rosie of the opportunity to get closer to Prince Caesar. But she is not going to give up so easily and give this fox her Caesar. The guys stood near the information stand and looked at the information about the qualifying test. The magic section this year could be crushed again by the martial arts section. Rumor has it that the bride, that new princess, also signed up. This means that there will be a battle between the two, which should be very entertaining. Lin Xiao read out the tasks for the competition on the sheet: group competition, elimination competition, and then they will choose 2 winners. Alina stood a little further away from the guy, calling it all too problematic. Lin replied that he had already heard all this, and both of them stubbornly turned away from each other. At this time, Rosie grabbed Caesar by the arm, and he asked him to let go. She saw in the distance that Lin Xiao and his maid were facing away from each other. Rosie crept up to the blonde and asked him in his ear if he had accidentally quarreled with his maid. The guy did not really want to go into details, but through gritted teeth he answered that it was. To this, Rosie called him a real idiot, because in her opinion, a girl should always be satisfied. Lin Xiao chuckled and succinctly hinted that it would be better for her to watch her Caesar, near whom another girl was sewn. The girl was very embarrassed at this. Even if in the end Caesar will be with her, the way the guy presents it is very embarrassing for her. She was so emotional at that moment 6 that she hit Lin Xiao, and he hit his face on a pole. The blonde shouted that she would pay him all the hospital bills for such a stunt. At this time, not very far from the scolding, Princess Yin invited Caesar to go and practice swordsmanship together. But then, of course, Rosie wedged in, covering the guy with her hand, as if he belonged entirely to her. She said that he had already promised her to train together. Caesar was not satisfied with such self-will, and he grabbed Rosie by the hand and began to explain that the reason why Shen Daiyin came was to speak on behalf of the Qin Empire, or maybe she had another motive. In other words, Caesar cannot make her his enemy, so Rosie must stop provoking the brunette. The pink-haired girl pretended to think deeply and finally obeyed the guy. After dealing with one girl, Caesar turned back to the princess and said that he had heard that Her Highness had excellent skills as a swordsman. And therefore, of course, he wants to see everything with his own eyes. While watching the two cooing from afar, Rosie took out her anger on poor Lin Xiao by strangling him with her hands. Why isn't she a magic swordswoman? She also really wants to train with Caesar. Poor Lin Xiao grunted for her to let him go. After school at Lin Xiao's house, the maid and the boy ate at the table. The young man calmly drank from a cup, furtively glancing at Alina, who was eating chicken legs. The girl was completely immersed in her thoughts, thinking that Lin Xiao had nothing to do with this matter, even though she was a little reckless, that stupid pervert. Finally, the silence, diluted only by the champing of the girl, was broken by the guy. He coughed warningly and finally said he didn't say he wouldn't do anything about the sub-demon's business. We need to wait until Alona comes back. She can think of a way to break this butler contract, and then she can leave in a hurry. Stopping chewing for a second, Alina asked if he really thought that she was in this house of her own free will. Yes, if not for the butler's contract, then he would have died a bunch of times already. Lin Xiao was angered by these words. Does the demon queen really think that they can solve the bandits by reaching the end of the forest? Alina didn't quite understand what he was getting at. Lin Xiao said that it didn't mean anything and that everything annoyed him wildly. Rising from the table, he said that he would go and take a walk and she would stay at home and let him just try to follow him. Alina thought, who needs him at all? But if not for the contract. Suddenly her head was terribly dizzy, but the guy no longer heard. Late in the evening, on a small alley, there was a trio of bandits. They were still discussing this Lin Xiao from the magic section, who was terribly infuriating. So he still has a maid and a princess. He is on good terms with everyone, even with the lady from the chairman's family. And why all the good goes only to him? Pada suddenly noticed that they were now close to Lin Xiao's home. Ha Liling asked what he was up to. After all, the guy is on good terms with Caesar. He better not do anything wrong. Hada asked a friend, and what's wrong with that? Isn't he just a magical swordsman? They suddenly met Alina on the way. Ha Liling asked his boys if it was Lin Xiao's maid. The boys were already laughing nastily in anticipation of the fun. Alina, meanwhile, put her right hand on her heart and realized that the radar had picked up Lin Xiao 10 meters to her left. But to her left was only a stone wall. Where did this idiot go? Alina suddenly realized that she was surrounded by 3 guys. These were 3 fighters of the 4th level. The guys began to ask the girl how she was doing, what she was doing here. Had Lin Xiao left her here all alone? Alina did not like this alignment at all, and in a harsh manner she told the guy to fuck off her. But suddenly the girl fell to the ground under the laughter of the bandits. They thought she might have been hurt. That jerk Lin Xiao knows how to play. Well, nothing, they will gladly help the poor girl. As soon as one of the guys touched Alina's shoulder, echoes of a fireball appeared around. They either look around, not noticing anyone in pitch darkness. A guy with a red mohawk on his head asked if anyone was here. Lin Xiao, who was standing on the fence, asked these bandits what they were going to do with his maid. Words cannot describe how glad Alina was to see her stubborn master. He quickly jumped down from the fence and put his arm around his poor maid. Lin Xiao called her a stupid demon queen because she managed to lose him even with the gift of radar. He then turned to the gang, put his hand forward and asked if they had a dying wish because they dared to offend his maid. The guys did not see Lin Xiao as a rival at all, and therefore they began to laugh out loud. Let him not forget, because now there is no princess next to him who could save him. If he, so be it, let his maid drink wine together, then they will let him go. The guy thought to himself, aren't they his opponents? He wouldn't have to worry about revealing himself in the trial if he dealt with them now. The young man put his arm around his maid by the shoulders, put his hand forward, and threw a fireball at the bandits with the words that the three of them really want death. The bandits did not expect such a turn, and stared at the guy with their huge eyes. They were determined to kick one place of the young man and rush to fight him, all because they want to teach this arrogant jerk a valuable lesson. Lin Xiao smirked, snapped his fingers, and thanked the thugs for making his selection test much easier for him thanks to them. Lying on the sofa and reading some newspaper, Lin Xiao told the demon lord that no one even knew that he was only at the 4th level. Alina didn't understand how he was going to level up his mana in this way if he didn't even train. The guy wanted to ride tough, so he replied that he was training during his sleep, and he answered it too dismissively. The girl just hopes that he at least understands that only small children can believe in his fairy tales. The young man sighed heavily, and with the air of a real wise man said that she did not understand anything. Alina snorted dismissively and casually asked if Alona was on the news by any chance. The girl sat down on the sofa with the guy, and together they began to look through the newspaper. The young man was very surprised that the mysterious killer merchant Lachlan appeared on the streets again. Alina had read that there was no one in the kingdom who could pose a high danger. Then why all this fuss? We need to find urgent news about Nana. Lin Xiao replied that he couldn't find anything related to the demon family. Suddenly, he stopped at something, and this interested the maid. Has he found something? The young man pointed at the newspaper, but he wasn't sure if that would help them in any way. The demon lord approached the newspaper and read that Neverwinter was welcoming a new nun to the holy church. What could this mean? The guy put his hand to his chin and thought that it was rare enough to transfer people to other church sects. Translation of a nun without any abrupt reason. Alina could not understand how this could be connected with the disappearance of the data. Then Lai dismissed the thought, perhaps he complicates things. He got up from the sofa and called the girl to think about what they would eat. Between them began a real war in the choice of food. Lin chose steaks, while the demon lord really wanted chicken and strongly insisted on it. However, the choice fell in favor of steaks because, after all, he is the master in this house. At this time, in the holy church, the bishop was very hopeful that she would be able to meet brother Lin Xiao very soon. And finally, the day of the selective test came. The students all gathered in one place. Some students tried to lure the wonderful and talented Prince Caesar for a good place. The other students also argued endlessly about something, as if while they were swimming there, Group F was already crowded with people anyway, and now they won't be able to watch Princess Yin's performance. Some blonde man apologized and tried to smooth things over by saying that they might still have time to see something if they rush right now. Behind them, Lin Xiao stood and yawned boredly. Oh, those fanatics. But he could not help but agree that the princess would be perfect for the role of his girlfriend. Blonde and brunette, they would look great together, like a couple. When the young man thought about the princess, he became completely crazy. Alina, who had been standing on the side all this time, again thought that the guy had again flown into his dirty thoughts. It was time for the battles, and Master Momu came to the battlefield of Group E. He ordered the team to get together because the match would begin soon. The man suddenly saw Lin Xiao walking along the wall and stopped him. Why did the teacher have such a strange smile? The man asked him if he knew all the members of the group, and when he received a positive answer, he laughed and said that the guy was deeply mistaken, because all the members of the group were assigned randomly, and if they were placed in a group with other martial arts, then they would have a very hard time. It was his turn to fight against the Hajai trio. Even though they are still sitting in their pants at the school, their strength is undoubtedly great. The blonde giggled and realized that he really would get it. Teacher Momu asked the guy if it was true, because last time he was very lucky that Caesar was nearby. But now, of course, everything will be different. Then Momu patted the guy on the shoulder and asked him not to worry too much about this, because he does not want the student to hurt himself. Lin Xiao only thanked the teacher in response. When it was time to leave, the teacher announced the first round, Lin Xiao versus. He suddenly cursed because he did not understand where Hada had gone. 10 minutes later, when the spectators were seated in the stands, Lin Xiao was still standing. At the same time, he yawned boredly and asked where his rival had gone after all. Momu felt a little awkward. He scratched the back of his head with his hand and asked the guy to wait a little longer, because Hada should be right there. The young man was already starting to get annoyed by this situation, and therefore said that the rules state that if the opponent did not appear 10 minutes after the start of the fight, then this is considered a refusal to match. Therefore, his opponent is automatically awarded the victory. So is the teacher willing to go against the rules to protect the students? The master began to stutter, and said that of course he was not going to give up the rules. Someone from the stands shouted that the martial arts sect always defeated the magic sect. And now Sir Momu is trying to shield a late student. A farce began around, but the teacher quickly asked everyone to be quiet. He announced that Hada did not show up for the duel. Therefore, victory is awarded to Lin Xiao. Turning to the fans who were sitting in the stands, the blonde found Alina among the crowd, sent her a sign from Victoria and happily announced that he had won. Vladika thought that this guy was really very thoughtful. She remembered how the Ha gang attacked her last night, and how Lin Xiao defeated them all alone. She was well aware that those 3 guys obviously would not be able to participate in the tournament. After 10 minutes, the teacher again announced that the second round of Group E was over and the victory was given to Lin Xiao because Ha Ti did not show up for the match. Another 10 minutes later, Momu said that the third round was again won by Lin Xiao because Ha Lai Ling did not show up for the match. The guy was very happy that he won all the rounds, although not in a completely fair way, and there was nothing for them to offend his maid. Lin called Allegra to go home, but at that time some boy ran up to the teacher and told the bad news. Ha Liling and his brother were terribly beaten and now they are being treated in a holy church. While the audience was whispering that this guy was too lucky, the young man himself asked if Alina could remember his back, because she was very numb. A few days later, the young man was sitting at home on an old red sofa reading a newspaper. Again, it was said that in addition to him, Caesar and Sheng Dai took the first places in their groups. Whether the opponent is a fighter or mag peer of Caesar's valiant magic, they are all in danger of being defeated. Even in high heels, Sheng Dai is more valiant, slaying everyone on the spot with her cherry blossom dance alone. Lin Xiao was so in love with the princess that he turned into a maniac just thinking about her. Suddenly, a wet rag hit him in the face of the arrival and he asked what Alina was doing here. The girl found something to answer, because his face is allegedly too dirty and therefore it needs to be wiped urgently. At first, Lin was taken aback. Of course, when else do you expect a rag to be thrown in your face? Suddenly, he was distracted by something interesting in the newspaper, and Alina thought it was news about Nana. However, contrary to all expectations, it was news about Lin Xiao himself, and it was said that the illegitimate boy of S rank had passed to the next stage by pure chance. Lin did not understand. Did they really doubt him? But the maid looked at him reproachfully and with a squint and reminded the blonde that, in general, he knocked them all out himself. Lin Xiao began to prove that this is completely different. Those guys were among those who provoked him, so there is no reason to drive him. A level 4 mage took down 3 fighters. They will simply be ridiculed if the truth comes out. The girl asked to stop pretending to be a weakling, because it is already obvious that he is a magician of the 6th level. The action took place in the city of Zurui in the Church of Light. The hooded people stood in a line with their hands raised in prayer, and said to the amazing goddess of light that they praise her, the mistress of everything in the world, their real, only supreme. The girl with blue hair invited Alona to eat with her. Alona was attired, all in white, with a cross on her uniform. She took a bite out of a loaf of bread and, with her mouth full, told Sister Jasmine that a whole month had passed since she had come to this place. So when will Zuer return? Jasmine tried again to come up with some kind of excuse, but then they were interrupted by a female voice, which informed Jasmine of her return. Jasmine held the hand of the blind Zuer, and was very glad that she had finally returned home. Seeing who this Zuer really was, Alona choked on a piece of bread. She couldn't believe it was the same blind girl who had been with her that night and nearly killed her. Passing by, the blind girl with a little told the little kitten that they had met again. Jasmine was surprised that both girls were familiar. Alona screamed in her heart that Zuer was the Snow Witch. Zuer confirmed in a calm voice that she and the Ice Witch were the same person. Nana asked with horror if they were in a conspiracy to catch her. Zu let out an exasperated breath. Well, what an ungrateful little kitten. If she hadn't let Alona go on purpose, then how would she have been able to meet the demon lord then? The one and only Jasmine did not understand what was happening between these two, but her sister was in no hurry to explain to her. She leaned towards the clone and clarified if Lin Xiao was not by any chance the one who wanted her to take her with her to the city without a winter hut. The thing is that Lin Xiao is her brother and she will listen to his wishes and take the girl with her to the city. But she must become her servant. Alona didn't expect this. Is she a servant? At this time, Lin Xiao smirked slyly. What a naughty maid he still has, who interrupts him every time. From such a tone, Alina became very nervous and even called the blonde the owner. What does he want to do with her? The guy asked not to worry too much, he just wants some of her blood. That's all. However, Alina did not think so, judging by the size of the syringe, which the guy held in his hands. She still thinks he'll drink her dry. She just needs to relax, because the guy is not going to hurt her. She just needs to be smart because Lin Xiao needs to collect some of her blood. Vladica began to run away, asking to get away from her. Look what you thought. He also runs after her with a needle. She will fight to the end, and he won't give his blood for nothing. As a result, the girl gave up and asked the guy to be at least a little more gentle with her. But the fact is that everything will end much faster if she stops twitching. After a while, the blonde was very glad that he still had the blood of the demon lord. This blood has healing powers, and it has the same effect on people. For all the torment, Lin Xiao handed Alina a blue pendant, a crystal that contained part of his mana. He read something about a servant's contract a couple of days ago in the library. The main part of the servant's contract is not based on the soul, but rather on energy. And this, in turn, means that as long as she carries the crystal with his mana in it, it will also be as if she is next to it. Thus, she is not affected by returning if they are too far apart. Alina's eyes sparkled with hope, so it also means that she is mowed then she can leave. But in fact, the guy knew that it only works for 2 hours in total. And then Vladica sighed sadly. But she is already happy with 2 hours away from such a sick pervert. On the following day, the arena was again full of people. The stands were packed. The fourth battle was announced. Luo Jai, Sire versus Shen. Tivian, Rocky and the princess were facing each other in the arena. Rosie told the princess that she should be very careful because she would definitely win. But the princess did not react to such threats, but only grinned. She called for the release of the cherry blossom dance, and after a while, it was clear that Shen was winning. Falling to the ground and resting her bloodied hands on the floor, Rosie crushingly admitted that she had been instantly killed. A little later, Rosie was drinking tea at Lin Xiao's with Alina standing by. She talked about the fight. She said that she was amazed even before she did anything. And if in between times, then Lin Xiao's house looks very neglected. It was a hint that the maid was terribly cleaning. But back on topic, Rosie suddenly suggested to Lin Xiao that they join forces. Together, they can uncover Shen's true identity, give Yan and ruin the evil engagement. And after Caesar, Lin Xiao approached Alina and whispered in her ear that Rosie looked like she hit her head really hard. Rosie continued, Shen, Daiyan is not just an ordinary princess. And Lin Xiao completely agrees with this, because she is also a very beautiful princess. Rosie was very angry, and she flew up to the guy, grabbing his breasts. Well, what an idiot he is. Having calmed down a little, she again returned to her place, and said that the princess was a murderer. It was unexpected. So suddenly, the gears in the guy's head began to spin. How is it a killer? What kind of nonsense? In the classroom, students were sentenced here and there while Lin Xiao slept on his desk, blowing snot bubbles. When the class bell rang, Wu Zai entered the classroom, coughed in his usual manner, and announced that despite the fact that the princess asked for a break, the next round would still take place. Hearing those words, Lin Xiao rose to an upright position and remembered Rosie's words about what he might not know. But Shen, Daiyan is trained in one of the best killing techniques, the shadow of the moon and the spirit of flowers. And the newspapers also said that the merchant Jackson was killed. The night Jackson was killed, Fu saw Princess Yin on the street, and her blade was stained with blood. Deep in his thoughts, the boy almost missed Wu Zai's speech to him. Lin Xiao's opponents in the next round will be Shen. Give Yen. She is very strong, so the guy must give everything 100%. As a result, the teacher moved on to the topic of the lesson, while Lin Xiao doubted whether the princess was really a murderer. Could she have taken the day off because she had a new target to kill? Meanwhile, outside the church without a winter hut, Alina walked down the street, hiding under a hood. She overheard the conversation of strangers who heard that the saint had come to the city. She is one of the youngest saints in the last 100 years, but she's got a pretty bad head. One man told the second that he had heard from his brother in the city of Zurui that the saint was known as the Snow Witch. His partner doubted it very much. How can a saint have such a nickname? Therefore, these rumors should not be taken seriously. Alina couldn't believe what she was hearing. She pushed all the people that were in her way. Suddenly she felt danger nearby and saw Shen not far from her. Diane, also wearing a hood. Mentally, Vladika ordered herself to gather herself. Is it true that the princess is a murderer? You should follow it and make sure of it. After a while, the demon lord stole away to the outskirts of the city without a winter hut. All this time, she watched the princess hiding behind the trees and in the shadows. But then she suddenly felt a bright smell. It swept like a flash. There can be no mistake here. This is the smell of a demon in the underground tunnels. Rebellion of the demon kins, Shen. Diane, demon. So what is it? The princess went into some hut and asked about which guy. The girl was told that her highness was very impressive. How could she kill that old bastard Jackson with such ease? The princess replied that she was just doing her job and nothing more. The interlocutor said that Jackson's guards were very strong, like 7 warriors, and the other was stronger than the mage focused on killing. Moreover, no matter how many killers the interlocutor hired, he could not get rid of him. Only her highness succeeded. The shadow of the moon and the spirit of the flowers have a nasty reputation. After a while, both girls returned to the city. The interlocutor of the princess said that it was time for him to go and he would count on the girl in the next missions. The interlocutor was Bishop Anderson. Alina, who was hiding around the corner, could not believe her eyes or her ears. How can a bishop of a holy church do such a thing? Vladika was indignant so loudly that she betrayed herself, and the princess began to look around. She grabbed her sword to be ready for anything, while Alina hid back around the corner and began to pray and call out to Lin Xiao. Out of nowhere, Lin Xiao really came, which was unexpected for the princess herself. She stood with her back to him, and the guy asked if it was her. The demon lord was saved, but she was very tormented by the question, how did he get there? The princess turned to the blonde with a shocked expression and asked why he was there. The guy replied with a smile that they had come in search of their maid, because she had already left for quite some time. So he started to get a little worried. What he heard was very strange for Vladika. Why did he need to look for her? Noticing the brunette's strange expression, Lin Xiao asked what was troubling her highness. She replied that these were all her personal reasons, so it was none of his business. Such an answer was quite rude and Lin stuttered that he just wanted to help. Without turning to Lin Xiao, the princess said that since he wanted to help her so much, he should beat her in battle in tomorrow's competition. Lin lowered his head and thought deeply about something, and only Alina was able to bring him to his senses, saying that her highness had already left and he could stop making such a stupid face. The blonde sharply raised his head and saw Allegra in front of him, whom he had been looking for all day. He began to scold her, because she was a naughty servant and now she would be forbidden to leave the house on her own, and even without permission. If the mana inside her crystal runs out completely, then she will die. The girl yanked her hand out of the man's grip and hissed menacingly that she didn't need him to worry about her. He must worry about his beautiful princess. Alina left, and the guy wondered why he came across such an unpleasant and naughty maid. Seeing that the girl had already moved away from him at a sufficient distance, he asked her to wait. And as if there had never been a conversation before, he asked if she had bought groceries for dinner. And when she replied that she had not bought it, the guy was completely confused. Why did they hang around there for a long time then? But it was no longer his business. When a sharp sword pierced a man through and through and a lot of other people's blood remained on him, Her Highness's mission was completed. There was a competition in the arena of Luo Lan Academy. It was the semi-final of the test. Lin Xiao from the side of magic against Shen Diyin from the side of magic. The battle was about to begin. As usual, the stands are noisy and full of people. Everyone came to see an interesting spectacle. How two strong students fight each other. Of course, it's not as exciting as if Her Highness was fighting her fiancé, but it's still the case. Lin Xiao made colorful circles and asked Her Highness for the opportunity to start first. He summoned a tornado wall, silt deposit and winter kingdom. Wu Zai, who was watching this of course, was very surprised when Lin Xiao used mixed magic. Momu did not expect either, and together with the master they played staring games for a while, as if communicating without words. They suddenly spoke sharply at the same time, and Wu Zai shouted that he did not teach the boy this trick, and Momu began to defend himself, because he did not even have time to say anything. In the arena, meanwhile, the struggle continued. The girl realized from the attacks of the guy that he was very serious. She really hopes that she can see the full extent of his true power. Her Highness took out her sword from under her weeping and stood up. At this action, Lin Xiao threw a raging flame at her, but she quickly deflected it with a flash of shadow. And then another insecure dance shouted. The girl suddenly swung her sword and jumped right at the guy. Momu noticed this and tried to somehow warn him, or just stating the fact that he is a real asshole. Alina watched the battle as if she were in a movie. As she sipped her drink through a straw, she thought that this kid is not very mature, but he has great ideas. But the only problem is that he faced a monster. Lin Xiao snapped his fingers and everything suddenly sparkled. The teachers were all surprised again. Wu Zai again said, "Don't teach the boy this." Momu was amazed that the guy used an instant spell without words. Shen Daiyan analyzed the opponent's actions and realized that he was trying to lure her. Lin Xiao decided to ask the girl when she would show him sword, despite the fact that he is already beating with all his might. The brunette replied that now is not the best time for this. Was he really out of breath already? But the instant cast isn't the only thing he knows, is it? Lin Xiao then advised her to prepare for his next strike. He threw a ring of fire at the girl, which surprised her a little. She was able to jump to the side without being hit. Is the guy trying to corner her? He must have a dozen tricks up his sleeve. In response, the princess wanted to throw a flash of shadow, but Momu asked her Highness not to do so. It was late. There was a powerful boom and everything around was on fire. Fortunately, none of the participants were hurt, and Lin Xiao was thinking about what to use in response to her Highness's actions. Shen called Lin Xiao a brat, which was pretty rude of her. He shouldn't underestimate her. When she wanted to attack him with her sword, the boy used a concealing mist, and the spectators in the stands could not see anything. They could not understand, did it all end like this? Meanwhile, in the middle of the fog that hid the rivals from prying eyes, Shen Daiyan asked Lin Xiao if he really thought that this mist would be enough to stop her. Her blade is able to cut through everything, even through the fog. From somewhere far away, the blonde replied that he was not going to belittle her Highness, but she was definitely right about his tricks, because his fog was not at all to fight with her, but for the spectators around them. Colorful circles began to appear everywhere, like stars in the sky. They were both blue and orange. Everything looked really beautiful, but no less dangerous. The guy apologized to the girl and the next second there was another explosion. From this, the tights on the beautiful long legs of the princess were torn in some places, and she, holding her blade in her hand, stood a little bewildered. She flopped to the ground, and her friend admitted defeat. Suddenly, Lin Xiao grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. He said that if she didn't receive treatment now, she could be scarred for the rest of her life. Lin Xiao picked her up in his arms, causing the girl's heart to beat at a tremendous speed. All this, of course, was seen by Alina, who, out of anger, crushed her glass of drink. Later, in the nurse's office, Princess Yin sat on the couch while Lin Xiao sat on his knees in front of her and treated her wounds with a special effective medicine. He poured a red liquid on her leg and told her that everything should be alright soon. For now, she should just put a bandage over her wounds. When everything was ready, he informed her Highness that he had done everything in his power. The princess commented that his butterfly knot with which he tied the bandage on her leg looked terrible, but despite this, she should thank Lin Xiao for what he had done for her. The guy immediately gathered himself, smiled and asked that since everything was going like this, why not? The demon lord who burst into the office did not let him finish. She said that everyone had left the stands a long time ago, while he was here, like a fool in love up to his ears, helping to heal wounds. How dare he use her blood for such lowly creatures as the princess? Lin Xiao tried to justify himself to Allegra, but in the end he would just get it from her. Let him not even dare to think now that he will ever be able to get her blood again. Lin stroked his new bumps and asked why she was so hostile towards Shen Daiyan. Maybe because she's just jealous, and he smiled ingratiatingly. The mere thought of this seemed insulting to the great and powerful demon lord. How could he possibly think such a thing? Deciding to change the subject, Alina told him to forget about this conversation, because she had to tell him something important. After a long story, Lin Xiao decided to sum up. Based on everything he heard, the Lord means that the princess is really a killer, and she is related to the sex of demons. However, she does not have any substantial evidence. The maid's anger scale just rose to the maximum level from the fact that this damned boy does not believe her. Not wanting to argue with him anymore, she asked him not to blame her later, that she had not warned before, because her highness would be his death. That same night, Lin Xiao and the Lord dined at his home. While the guy was eating his rice with meat with chopsticks, he suddenly realized that Allegra was really very angry with him. When he put a piece of food in his mouth, He immediately spat it back out and yelled at the Lord with all his strength. How could she confuse salt with sugar again? Without denying it, Alina told him to just not eat it if he didn't like it. But rather, she did not say, but snapped. After dinner, the young man read the newspaper, where it was written that the mysterious killer had struck again. The wise Hobbs had been killed the previous night. During the investigation, a mysteriously stained piece of cloth was discovered, as if the killer had been injured. And then it dawned on Lin Xiao. He beckoned to his maid, who was carrying a plate, and she leaned over his shoulder, putting it in the newspaper. He didn't find anything. The guy said that he was going to check on the new nun tomorrow, but Vladimir reminded him that his match against Caesar was also due tomorrow, and the guy replied that he would not go. And in the newspaper, at the mention of a piece of cloth, there was a photo of the bandage bow that Lin Xiao tied on her highness's leg. Isn't that proof? The next day, Caesar stood on the platform under the scorching sun and persuaded himself not to worry so much. These are just a few instant spells. He's a magic swordman. He also wields a killing dragon sword, so he's definitely capable of winning. He must become a hero. A challenge to a duel like this means nothing. Lin Xiao is stronger than him, which is very good, since Caesar will be able to train. A second later, it exploded. How can he beat that guy? Suddenly, Momu came up and asked if he was alright, and when the guy replied that everything was fine, Momu was satisfied with the answer. Caesar is the Academy's trump card, and every student dreams of seeing his true power. Fans from the stands shouted to the guy about their great love for him, holding posters for support. They shouted how strong and handsome he was. Caesar was embarrassed to hear this, and even in front of a teacher. And when the girls completely stuck around him, Wu Zai approached them. Rosie was hiding around the corner. She called the teacher to her side and handed him a piece of paper, which she should give to Wu Zai at Lin Xiao's request. While unfolding the sheet, Wu Zai realized that Lin Xiao was not going to come to the match due to his belief in the goddess of light. From anger, the master squeezed the unfortunate piece of paper in his hands. He became so angry that he started yelling for everyone to get out of the way who stood in his way. He should definitely teach Lin Xiao a lesson. And how dare he think that a serious event like this is just a joke? Believer, when did he only manage to believe in the goddess of light? Poor Rosie tried to restrain the furious teacher and asked him to calm down. But when she realized that she couldn't cope on her own, she called Momu and Caesar for help. As a result, Lin Xiao lost the opportunity to fight, which made Caesar the winner of the competition. At this time, the crowd of her disciples could understand why the nun had not yet appeared. According to rumors, she must be very cute. Zhu came out to the people, followed by Alona in a maid costume, and turned to a resident of the city without a winter hut. She greeted them all, while Nana hovered around and did not know where to put herself. The crowd could finally begin to cheer that the attendant had finally come out. Everyone started shouting that she was very sweet and how much they loved her. The girl introduced herself as Su Ye. At the same time, Lin Xiao and Alina stood among the crowd and could not believe what they saw. They simultaneously turned to each other and were surprised that both knew the girl. Everyone called the name of a friend, and Alina began to remember snippets of phrases that mentioned Su Ye. She is also known as the Snow Witch. Alina told Lin Xiao that he had practically locked Alona in a pit of fire. He is a very nasty person. This phrase was heard by the new servant, and she smiled strangely. When they returned home, there was a real battlefield. Lin Xiao yelled at Sovereign, calling her not a black cat, but a real evil dog. While calmly sipping her tea, Alina asked where did he get it, what could stop her from killing the nun. Clutching a fresh bite on his hand, the guy said that if he did not stop her, then she would have died. She even dared to bite the guy. Remembering the past day, the guy said that if a girl dares to do something, then in the middle of the Church of Light, then she will pray for death. Suer seems a little mysterious, but she won't touch Alona. The demon lord only snorted in response. It's obvious that the guy is worried about her. If something happened to Alina, she would never forgive Lin Xiao. If she could only remove the power of that blood pact, killing him and that girl would be a piece of cake. He must understand this. Taking a savory bite from his delicious sandwich, Lin Xiao said that he knew she wouldn't do it. But what does this doll do? When Alina heard the nickname Lin Xiao had called her, she became very angry. How dare he call her that? Nana and Su Ye appeared in the passage between the doors, which greatly frightened the household. How did they get here? Lin put his hand to the back of his head and awkwardly said that it had been a long time since she had last seen each other. The blue-haired woman clarified that they had not seen each other for a year, and 3 months and 15 days. And then she called him her older brother. The guy smiled, but noticed a furious Alina, who was waiting for them both to finish with their greetings. She was about to attack Chuer, but Lin Xiao ordered Allegra to stop. She only wanted this blind bastard to die. But Pyur turned out to be wiser and advised the Lord not to do this. If she suddenly dares to kill her, she will hurt Nana. When Alona suddenly rose into the air, Lin Xiao asked Zhuer to let Alona leave immediately. Then Nana fell to the ground and coughed, while the nun exhaled heavily, as if she had been holding the girl with her own hands all this time. Vladika already wanted to run to her Nana and help her, but the guy's strong hand stopped her. Without waiting for an answer, Allegra turned to Alona, who kept saying that she was very sorry, because now she would definitely not be able to return to her side. Vladika was sorry to the point of tears when she saw the bell around Nana's neck. But suddenly, she felt Ling Xiao's hand stroking her head in a consoling gesture. He assured the maid that Su would not touch Nana or hurt her. Suddenly, the nun grabbed the hand Allegro and confirmed that brother Ling Xiao was right. As long as she is obedient, she will not hurt Nana. Su heard that Allegra was beautiful and therefore asked permission if she could touch such beauty. She wants to know how beautiful she is, and for this she needs to touch the girl's face. The maid was terribly annoyed. What kind of nonsense is this abnormal in general? For a long time, Vladika wanted this Velcro to get behind her as soon as possible, and therefore moved towards the exit. She wanted to kill her, but Ling Xiao pulled her away and asked her not to be so quick-tempered. And Su was just having fun, as expected of a demon queen. The guy asked his sister how she knows the real identity of Allegra, and she began to answer because, in the royal demon forest, something strange was happening among the trees. Some stranger asked the wolf to hurry up, and they closed Alina in a wooden box. They simply had no other choice. The most important thing is that they ensure the safety of Mrs. Allegra. Later, in the city of Xinfeng, the wagon was moving at its full speed. The demon world was no longer safe. For as long as they can, they must take Mrs. Allegra to that person. One of the guards informed Sister Suyer that they had caught a spy, and then he asked what they should do with him. Then the blind nun ordered the spy to be killed. But suddenly she stopped near a wooden box. What was this thing? It looks like there's something very important inside. Returning to the present, Suyer asked her older brother if he liked her gift. What kind of like is she talking about? Her gift is just one headache for a guy. Allegra, standing on the sidelines, asked to whom he was lying so brazenly. He had already shown her all his true feelings. Ling Xiao said it was fine because as her master, he would not turn his back on her. Even if she eats more than anyone else and behaves rudely with him, he still won't leave her alone. While the girl was beside herself with rage, the young man suggested returning to the previous topic. He asked his sister where this strange servant contract came from. Was it from a spy? The blue-haired girl took a sip from her mug and said that she was the one who stole the contract from the previous bishop in Surui City. It was about a year ago, right after she was separated from Ling Xiao. At that time, she entered the Church of Light and was an ordinary nun. She recalled being asked about the quality and taste of local food. It was a guy named Peterson. He seemed very sincere, but later it turned out that he was a real scumbag. He promised to take her to a special place and then used black magic to control her. As Peterson led Sue down the hall, he told her to believe in her decisions because that direction is what God created her to do. The place he took her to was just disgusting. He was full of corrupted thoughts, so that in the end, was absorbed by her black magic. And after Suyer took a couple of things from his collection, and the servant's contract was one of those things. Ling Xiao couldn't understand why she didn't tell him about this earlier. About to take another sip of tea, Suyer suddenly stopped. Doesn't he want to compliment her? She did something good. The guy just muttered something in response, but he didn't seem to be entirely convinced. He finally relaxed completely, walked over to his sister and hugged her tightly. He was very sorry that he could not protect her. Nana stood on the sidelines and barely held back her tears. Why was she so moved by this sight before her eyes? Allegra, meanwhile, sat sullenly on the sofa, cross-legged and arms crossed, and asked to end family love as soon as possible. The nun smiled and noticed that someone was jealous. At this phrase, the maid got angry, jumped up from the sofa and ordered Suyer to watch her words. Who is jealous? The nun asked, didn't she? Allegra became angry as soon as her brother approached her. Is it because she loves Ling Xiao? Alina did not want to continue this topic anymore, so she quickly got up from the sofa, approached the girl, and asked what she was going to do with Nana. Poor Nana ran up to her mistress, hugged her hand, and shedding crocodile tears, began to complain about the nun who offended her. This nun definitely uses black magic. She even made poor Nana wear a necklace so you couldn't move away from her. And on the necklace was a bell. From the story of little Nana, Elena realized that the nun was also an evil witch. The guy tried to pacify her, but his younger sister interrupted him. She said that the demon queen clearly puts lies through her teeth. The maid asked why she was telling her this, and then Suyu replied that her girl was in the place with her in order and in good health. Lin Xiao also keeps her calm and healthy. Su walked over to Allegra and stroked her chin, which discouraged the demon queen. Suddenly she was touched by Nana, who noticed that the mistress had gained weight. The demon lord hit her on the head with her elbow and asked why they have such an idiot like her in their family. The nun said that she was not going to raise a kitten for the demon queen for free. Lin Xiao was surprised by this and asked his sister what she meant. She answered that she just has one requirement to take care of the demon queen's niece. She must make an alliance with her. Both the demon lord and Lin Xiao were surprised at what they heard at the same time. Remembering the nun's offer to work together, Alina reflected that this girl was indeed a nun, also known for her black magic, and she wants to make an alliance with the demon lords. What is she up to? Can she trust her? Through the thickness of her thoughts, the girl heard her name. She noticed that the teapot she was holding was pouring water directly onto Lin Xiao's head. He was very annoyed by this and asked if the tea mug was for her. The girl quickly stopped the flow of water and promised to immediately clean everything up. The young man noticed what a useless maid she was. Who else would want to keep her away from him? In her hearts, the girl screamed for him to let her go. The next day, Lin Xiao stood with his maid in front of Princess Yin and Luo Jai. He asked Her Highness why Rosie had come with her. She, in turn, replied that even his maid came with him. Caesar, who was standing in the country, wanted to ask the same thing, but their conversation was interrupted by Master Wu Zai. He started to say that in the school fighting league, the team consists of 4 people. Lin Xiao asked that even if so, then why does the rule say that only those who place first and second can become candidates? From such a question, the master got nervous, and with grief in half came up with the answer that it was because only their 2 places remained from the start. Discouraged, Lin Xiao asked the demon lord about this. How could the master say something so embarrassing, but not feel embarrassed at the same time? The girl replied that people greatly exaggerated. The guy looked at Rosie and could not understand how they could select her for the team. The girl, noticing his gaze, rudely asked why he was looking down at her. Still nervous, the master wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Rosie, who said that she was on the team because she was talented, smart, and beautiful. But the teacher saw fit to put in his 2 cents and said that Chire is from one of the biggest baker families for the Luo Lan Academy. Told the teacher that he shouldn't be so imprudent. But the master continued to ignore her and said that Rosie's abilities are also incredibly impressive, and that's why she's on the team. And why does Lin Xiao feel jealous of this? The master suggested that we talk about the school league fights and said that the school league competitions include each of the academies of the 4 nations, and the venue for the fights changes every year. Fights this year will be held on the Island of Despair in the kingdom of Weihai Nuo, and the guys who saw all the participants in the league should understand everything. The league is not responsible for protecting the students, so they must rely only on themselves to survive. Also, there is always a large number of victims every year, and the master does not doubt their strength, but also very much hopes that they will be more accurate and prudent. These fights are very important because they can influence the Long Bada Kingdom and make Luo Lang Academy's position higher among the 4 nations. There are 3 teams here that they will need to look at. Suddenly, the master was distracted by Caesar. He said that he was thinking about the most important match, and therefore he wants Rosie to stay away from this. Everyone present was very surprised by what they heard, especially Rosie, who was in love with Caesar. Alina, who had been standing aside all this time, became interested in what was happening. It seems like something very interesting is going on. Rosie went up to Caesar, thumped the table loudly with her hand, and asked what he meant by saying all this. The guy was about to answer, but the girl interrupted him, frowned, and asked if he thought she was too weak to take part in the league fights. Caesar tried to justify himself, and said that this was not what he wanted to say. Rosie said she knew her limit. She just wanted to fight alongside him, that's all. Caesar, stuttering, replied that the strength of the participants who would participate in the battles was too high. If she went there, she could suffer greatly. Rosie, barely holding back her tears, asked if she would interfere. She realized with annoyance that this was exactly what Caesar had been thinking about all this time. She would never speak to him again, so she ran off in the other direction. Lin Xiao tried to stop her, but it was already too late. The guy asked if Caesar would really turn his back on her. Caesar himself became very nervous and said that he would not argue about her natural talent, because she is a very hardworking girl. But this does not change the fact that she has a possible chapel. The danger of fighting in the league is unpredictable, and if anything happens to her, she will not be able to defend herself. And his strength is too far from that. Rosie ran down the corridors, wiping her tears. She thought about what a real idiot Caesar was. Caesar will no longer be able to protect her the way he used to. But Lin Xiao put his hand on his shoulder and asked him to wake up. Does he really think the school will let them hurt the precious daughter of a baker family? To confirm his guesses, the guy asked the teacher if this was true, and he replied that he really could get everything he wanted for his money. When everyone gathered in the square, and the carriages were served, it was time to deviate. When Princess Yin first arrived at this place, she simply had to pass through the Hai Nuo Kingdom. There are so many beautiful landscapes among mountains and lakes. Looking at the princess, Lin Xiao still couldn't believe that she was a bloodthirsty assassin. But suddenly he was distracted by a push on the cheek. The maid asked him what he was staring at. The suitcase from his hands fell to the ground and fell right on his leg, which turned out to be very painful. Thinking about something, he asked everyone to wait for a while because he would be back soon. He suddenly realized that Shen, Diane and Papa Anderson had met before. It had to do with gender demon. Suyer is a nun in a city without a winter hut, which means she will have to come face to face with Anderson and work alongside him. A man in uniform with a cross and shoulder-length brown hair ate his food appetizingly while munching loudly. He asked Suyer if she wanted to have a bite to eat. The blue-haired girl, seeing Nana's look at the food, told her that she would die early if she ate so much fatty food. At that time, Nana had only one tasty and juicy steak in her head. But seeing the look of her mistress, she said that she was not hungry at all, and for this the nun praised her obedient kitten. Appetizingly swallowing the last piece of food, the man said that he meant if the sister wanted to take a piece, and if not, then she should let her maid take it. He took a fork and speared a tasty and juicy piece of meat on it. He lifted it into the air and handed it to the maid, asked if she would like to eat just by looking at the meat. But suddenly he remembered something, because his sister does not see anything at all. What a pity. The nun did not react to this in any way, and with a smile asked if the man could now answer her question, since he had already eaten. Puffing out his cheeks, the man asked what the question was. But in fact, he thought to himself why he feels like this child is insulting him. The girl repeated her question. Was there any recent activity in the Vatican? And where is the cart that was visible in the window going now? The man broke out in sweat from the mere realization that the girl was able to see the wagon. Being blind, the girl asked Anderson if everything was all right with him. Did she ask a really difficult question to answer for so long? Or is she really not supposed to know? Father Anderson was quick to say that all the resources had been prepared for the trip to the Hai Nuo Kingdom. They were ordered by His Highness to use this opportunity to spread their religion and also to protect Prince Caesar and the princess. Suyer was very surprised by what she heard and asked why he didn't tell her everything at once. Then the man replied that she had just arrived here, so he thought that they would need time to rest. But the nun quickly ordered Alona to pack all her belongings because they are also going to go and spread their faith. Suyer wanted to see what Anderson was really willing to go for. A little later, Alona went outside, looked into the boxes that stood on the street and was surprised. Then Suyer asked her what she saw there. But Nana replied that inside she saw a grain, a weapon and some magical flowers along with crystal materials. She didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. The nun clarified whether she had checked everything there, and when she received a positive answer, she asked if she was very sensitive. Suddenly, a scream was heard from the street. The guard called Sister Suyer and asked him to give him 1 minute. Nana looked out the window of the carriage and began to look for whoever dared to make this noise. But outside was Lin Xiao, who was making his way through the guards. It couldn't be anyone but him. In the window of the carriage, the guy saw Alona and threw a piece of paper at her. The girl caught him and reported this to the nun. The note said about some fat person to beware of, and the nun immediately understood who her older brother was talking about. Anderson should have been careful. Meanwhile, the guardsman tried to drive away the blonde, who was in the way, because he was delaying the carriage. So the guy hid under a tree and whispered to his sister to be careful. At this time, another hooded man was sitting in Anderson's cockpit. And it was none other than the princess who asked why the nun went to take off. Anderson replied that it all looked like she had discovered something, but that it didn't matter even if she tried to do something. Then she can't blame Anderson for everything she's done. Meanwhile, near the gates of the kingdom of Hai Nu, the carriage was already approaching, and the master and his students rode in it. Wu Zai informed his boys that they had arrived in the Hai Nu kingdom and that they were currently passing by the arena. He also has a few more catches for his students. The fact is that most teams may be similar to them, but there is a person who is worth paying attention to. The prince and Lin Xiao got off the carriage first, and the second one was overjoyed that they had finally arrived at their destination. There is a man in the other team who is called Valu, and his nickname is Golden Lion. He is a vassal of the emperor. One day, he went through the divine selection and became one of those returning heroes, so his strength cannot be underestimated. In addition to him, the guys should also avoid Charles. When the name came out of the old man's mouth, the prince and Rosie exclaimed at the same time and then turned to each other. But seconds later, as this hitch occurred, the pink-haired girl turned away with a snort. Lin Xiao scratched the back of his head as usual and asked Wu Zai who this Charles was. And then the master answered him that they would find out about this when the time came. In the meantime, they were going to the right place and Rosie was just delighted with how beautiful everything was around. She began to beg Caesar to take a walk with her, but then she grabbed the Lord of Darkness by the hand and dragged her for a walk. It was necessary to do everything to ignore Caesar. The guys stood aside and Lin Xiao realized that Caesar, apparently, had really pissed off Rosie. At this time, Princess Yin decided to move away, which did not go unnoticed by Lin Xiao. The brunette turned onto High New Street and saw a counter with sweets. Behind the counter was a woman with white hair and a hat, and the candy she was selling was quite rare. She had already eaten the last 3, so she was really going to find some more here, and how well it turned out. The girl in the hat looked up and told the miss that this was the last candy, so she really hoped that the brunette would buy it. The princess asked what it all meant, and then the saleswoman grabbed her hand and said that this was a special order from the main father. Then the brunette asked again if it was true. Then she threw the paper on the ground. At this time, Master Wu Zai and some woman were talking. She had no way of imagining that there was a member at Lulan Academy who was dressed as a maid. How funny. All this time, Allegra stood aside and listened to the remarks with her arms folded across her chest. The old man, meanwhile, reprimanded a woman named Jennifer because she can't joke like that. Then she said she wasn't joking. Why don't Wu Zai take a test and understand everything that way? That girl looks like an ordinary girl, and even if she is a maid, why would she serve a poor child like him? Lin Xiao didn't like that a stranger spoke of him like that. Didn't the state rules say the poor weren't allowed to have a maid? Jennifer replied that he could say whatever he wanted. They will soon find out if the maid is the girl or not. The magic crystal will find mana, even at a high level. And if this crystal ball finds mana around the blonde, even if it's not much, then they will consider Lulan Academy to be crooks and remove them from the competition. But if they decide to retire from the competition, they can keep their reputation. Wu Zai simply chuckled in response, and Lin Xiao asked Allegra if she was against it. The girl asked him what he thought about it. The guy got angry because the Lord did not give a specific answer for a long time, and in the end she answered ambiguously. At this time, Jennifer told everyone to be quiet and extended her hand towards the crystal ball. It's time to start. 10 minutes later, the Demon Lord was standing near the table, surrounded by other people who were wearing cloaks and hoods. One person looked at Allegra, did not understand why there was no reaction. She looks like she doesn't have any mana. Wu Zai and Lin Xiao really wanted everything to be okay, and in the next moment, the crystal ball turned bright red. Jennifer was not very happy about this fact, because the red reflects the highest mana capacity. So how can this be? But in the end, the woman said that no matter what color the ball reflected her mana, it still means. She did not have time to finish speaking because Lin Xiao shouted that the ball was changing color. He turned yellow, and it was very unexpected for Jennifer, because the ball continued to change color and became green. It was simply impossible. Vladica watched them and thought what stupid little people they were. The ball continued to change colors, then pink, then purple, then blue. Nobody could understand why this was happening. Eventually it turned black. Allegra put her hand on him and asked if their crystal ball had become like this. In the next second, the ball suddenly cracked, and before Lin Xiao had time to shout to her to be careful, the ball exploded. The guy ran up to her, trying to cover himself, and then asked what she was doing. The blonde suddenly began to stutter, she doesn't know anything, and just apologized to the guy. Lin Xiao took her hand in his and started examining her for injuries, but the Lord said she was fine and not injured. Fortunately, everything worked out. But what would she do if she really got hurt? The Demon Lord couldn't believe if the boy was really just worried that she might get hurt. She suddenly blushed because she thought. She was interrupted by Master Wu Zai's exclamation. He angrily asked that woman Jennifer if she did anything with the crystal ball. The woman in response told him to stop yelling, and was outraged that the old man dared to accuse her of something. The master demanded an explanation, which eventually exploded the crystal ball, and when the woman tried to come up with an answer, she was called out. Suddenly, a young man in royal attire appeared. It was His Majesty Prince Charles. He told the woman that with her screams, the name of their kingdom would simply collapse. Standing aside, Lin Xiao asked Allegra if she had seen it. Everything was pretty cute. Wu Zai coughed and told the boy that it was the golden tiger he had mentioned on the way to this place. A young man in blue clothes. He had such strength and aura. He approached the prince and held his elbow while asking him to be careful. When Allegra and Lin Xiao saw the prince, they were shocked. The blonde remembered that he also told him about Charles Wu Zai. Meanwhile, the prince asked if anyone could tell him what had happened there. Lin Xiao was indignant. How could someone so cute turn out to be a boy? After some time, after listening to the story of what happened here, Prince Charles said that if everything was true, then the crystal ball in the end did not give a result. Then it means that the maid has no mana and can take part. Master Wu Zai breathed a sigh of relief and thanked the prince for his approval. Jennifer frantically asked the prince for what reason he came here, and then he replied that he had come here to greet his old friend. Then the prince looked at the brunette and asked if she was going to do the same. Lin Xiao leaned over to Rose and asked what was going on. And when the pink-haired one replied that Prince Charles was Shen Daiyin's fiancé. This was very unexpected news for Lin Xiao. Rosa continued to say she didn't know why the king initiated the cancellation of the engagement. And then the guy asked if Caesar was really a fallback for dressing up as a girl. One of the prince's guards reported that people from the Holy Church had arrived, which surprised Charles. He didn't expect them so soon. Allegra and Lin Xiao turned to each other at the mention of the Holy Church, because they were obviously thinking the same thing. The blue-haired girl stepped out of the carriage with Alina. Finally they arrived. Prince Charles came out to meet the arrivals from the Holy Church. He saw Anderson's dad, Suyer's sister, and thanked them for coming so far to end up here. Nuyer told the prince that he shouldn't be so serious and grateful. She just wanted to ask if the people from Luo Lang Academy had arrived or not. Such a question puzzled the prince, but in the end he said that they had arrived some time ago. Suyer asked the guy to take her to their place of residence, and the prince ordered the guards to take her sister to the place of residence of the Luo Lang Academy. Meanwhile, Papa Anderson told the prince that they arrived here in a hurry, because they missed the opportunity to have dinner, and now he is too hungry and would not refuse to eat. The prince did not let Dad finish and said that the food was prepared in advance, so he invited him to eat. Meanwhile, Suer was sitting in the tent on Lin Xiao's lap and eating all sorts of goodies from his hands. A little off to the side, Allegra asked Nana if that witch had offended her at least once. Nana hugged her mistress tightly and said that she was all right. As long as she is a good maid, her sister will not touch her, but this witch always gives her good food, saying that this is her reward for good work. Otherwise she simply cannot help herself. Nana now thinks that she has become too useless and stupid as a maid due to her teachings. Allegra noticed that Nana had become a little chubby chibai, then went to the cat, put her hand between her ears and told her that she should carefully take care of herself and be her sister's maid, and then she would take care of her and protect her. Nana was suddenly frightened. Doesn't this mean that Mrs. Allegra doesn't need her anymore? The sovereign said that everything was wrong, and at that moment, Sister Suyer suddenly turned in their direction and asked the Demon Queen, did she finally understand this? As long as Alona behaves well, she will definitely not wish her any harm. Allegra told Nana that it wasn't that she didn't need her. Nana just has to be a good maid for that witch and one day she will definitely take her home. Suyer was unhappy that the maid again called her a witch. Alona lowered her head and told her mistress that she would listen to her. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao asked his sister not to argue with the maid, but rather eat delicious tangerine. And she, smacking deliciously, said that she would listen to her older brother. After a while, Suyer finished with a snack, went to the exit from the tent and called Nana to her. Allegra just sighed heavily, and her sister said that there was no need, because she was the same idiot as her niece. The demon lord was unhappy. Is she an idiot? The blue-haired woman asked if she wasn't an idiot, why shouldn't she use her hand to touch the crystal ball? The sister then told her brother that his maid must really be an idiot, but why didn't he stop her? Maybe he's an idiot too. The blonde couldn't figure out if this had anything to do with him. Then the holy maiden asked her elder brother if he had forgotten that she was not just a demon, but also a demon queen. The power of the ancestors is inside her body, so as soon as she touched the crystal ball, she blasted it with her pure power and strong mana. It was just pure luck that old hag Jennifer and her effeminate boy both turned out to be idiots. If not, then Lin Xiao and Allegra would be in big trouble. Vladika exploded angrily at all this. It seems that the holy sister Suyer is not so smart if she does not guess the true face of Pope Anderson. When the saint heard about that fat man, she told the maid that her older brother had given her a special card before. And what do they even know? Lin Xiao tried to put something together in his head. It was a similar situation with something. Suyur asked her brother if he thought Papa Anderson might have something to do with those unusual half-blood demon attacks. Lin Xiao told her that she should be extremely careful around this guy because she is always there, and Su promised him she wouldn't take her eyes off that fat man. But now it's time for her to go, because she can't leave Anderson's dad alone for long. When Suyur and Nana were already leaving the tent, the blue-haired woman suddenly turned back and asked Allegra if she had changed her mind. Who does she want to be, part of the Union, or is it still her enemy? Pleiadica asked through her teeth if she had a choice, and then Su said that it was very good that she understood everything. One day, when this event is over, she will be able to destroy the service contract. The blonde asked if the Holy Maiden was not afraid that as soon as she came down, she would immediately kill her, and her brother too. Sister Su confidently replied that the maid would not do it. When asked by Allegra why she thinks so, Suyur did not answer, but instead asked her about the contract. If she loses, she will let the demon lord be her sister, and if she wins, Allegra will be her brother's handmaid for all eternity. Pleiadica militantly clenched her fists and said that then she was definitely in business. She won't lose for anything. However, the blonde had the feeling that she was missing something very important, and suddenly she decided to call the Holy Virgin when she had already gone in a different direction. Lin Xiao, who had been standing nearby all this time, thought that his maid was very stupid. On the coast of a disappearing island, the disappearing island is completely surrounded by the sea on all sides, where 120 teams are located. The duration of the competition is exactly 1 week. It was decided to hold competitions on points. At the end of the week, the team that scores the most points and does not lose a single participant will be the winner. Wu Zai stayed in the boat while his students jumped onto the land of the island and asked them to be careful. Lin Xiao asked him not to worry too much because they would definitely be the first, and Rosa will help Caesar take first place. Lin Xiao was glad that now their plan could work, but the other guys didn't even hear about any plan. And then the blonde promised to tell them everything on the way. At this time, red eyes were hidden behind dense trees, which were waiting for the command. Meanwhile, the team was already in the middle of the forest on the island of despair. Lin Xiao stood and looked up at the strange yellow luminous fruit that looked like a ball. I think he calls yin yang. This is a special fruit that grows on this island, which contains mana energy. He has a very funny and cool shape. The princess stood a little behind Lin Xiao and said that they must have been very lucky that they were able to find such a fruit in the middle of the forest almost immediately after they arrived on this island. Allegra, on the other hand, stood behind everyone and was once again convinced that people were too naive. Collecting such a fruit is one of the ways to get extra points. Caesar stood a little further away and suggested that they not look at it for so long, but simply collect it as soon as possible, and save it along with the Gongwu crystal. This crystal is able to release and store the energy inside the yin-yang fruit. This ability is used as a way of sifting out the result, since only the yin-yang fruit already gives 1 point. As a result, the guys picked this fruit and immediately got +1 point. Suddenly, an arrow flew past the princess and pierced into the bark of a tree. It was very unexpected, and the brunette was very scared. Lin Xiao told Allegra and Princess Yin to watch the crystal, while Caesar told Rose to hide behind him. On the way, Lu Ren's team, in blue uniforms, stood in their way. The top guy stepped forward and said that if they were smart enough, they would give them the Gongwu crystal. And if they are still not smart, then they will no longer be so good towards them. Lin Xiao realized that, judging by the name that was embroidered on the boy's uniform, they were definitely not very good guys. But after pulling himself together, Lin Xiao said that they were just passing by and had absolutely no intention of getting into a fight with them. They just have to go ahead. Caesar did not appreciate such modesty in Lin Xiao's behavior, and Rose fully agreed with this. Lin Xiao asked the guys if they forgot what he just said. They need to conserve their energy. While there was this hitch, a gang of opponents thought they were scared. They also noticed that they also brought a maid with them to this competition. Obviously, they got there in such a dark way. One of the guys even told the blonde that he could give them the crystal and go on a date. They also have a bunch of girls in their teams that you could have a good walk with. Lin Xiao realized that even though those guys in front of them were not worth their mana, they looked like they were underestimating their mana. They pissed off Lin Xiao terribly. Foolish people. The red-haired guy from the gang said that they looked like they had character, so don't blame them later for what's going to happen now. Suddenly, something happened in just 1 second. No one understood anything, but there was a lot of blood around, and Princess Yin stood and held her sword. Lin Xiao asked the opponents, did they really think they could be easily bypassed? The guys immediately decided to give up and accept their defeat, and so the guy Lai Ren handed them his crystal, which he absorbed with his own, and then they can get as much as 10 points for stealing. The second way to get points, take someone else's Gongwu crystal and get the stolen points. The number 11 appeared on the crystal, and Lin Xiao enthusiastically shouted that it was Rose's number. Meanwhile, the guys from the other gang ran away from them sparkling heels. Rosa was upset that Caesar didn't even get a chance to show his abilities. And then Lin Xiao told Caesar that he should save his strength for tougher enemies. There are a lot of strong teams on this island and they can't spend their mana right now. Caesar told his friend that he had received points, but the battle was inevitable, and Rosa noticed that he did not even deny it. Lin Xiao came up with the perfect battle plan. Caesar suddenly broke through. He started yelling at the opponents that he is the 5th prince of the Ranbada kingdom and they should hurry up and bring him their weapons and the Gangwu crystal, and then he will spare their lives. In his mind, the guy thought that this remark, well, is no good. However, Lin Xiao liked everything. People in raincoats looked at the prince and did not understand who he was and why he was so strange. He looks very stupid in their opinion. Screaming ass guy. Caesar began to pretend to use his mana. He took out his sword and pulled it forward so that everyone could see, and then the guys in raincoats were immediately stunned. How can this guy have so much mana? Princess Yin swept her sword just above their heads. Fortunately, they had time to duck. Lin Xiao hugged the Caesar and said that he would be the one to draw attention, while the princess could cut them down in one move. Lin Xiao himself and Rosie will encourage them, and Allegra will be their team paint, and this plan is just perfect. Caesar felt like he was humiliated, but Lin Xiao asked his friend not to pay attention to such trifles. Using Lin Xiao's plan, the Luo Lang Academy team fought their way through the other teams. Stolen points from 4 teams in 2 days totaled 41. Rosie stood at the edge of the cliff, looked down, and asked Lin Xiao if he got a new piece of fruit. The guy at that time was at the bottom and almost reached for the yellow ball. Finally got it, and it is unlikely that there will be at least one yin fruit in the area. Caesar noticed that it seemed that the closer they got to the center of the island, the more yin fruit there was. Rumors say that there may be secret places somewhere in the center, the so-called silver treasure and full of yin fruits. Lin Xiao jumped up from the ground and asked Caesar to let them find this place and go straight to the first place. Then he turned to Rosie and asked what she was doing, to which the girl replied that she did not feel well. It's because Caesar and Shen Daiyan work on the spot. The guy said that their collaboration is really good. And that was the problem for Rosie. She almost cried from this, and Lin Xiao simply begged her that now is not the time for jealousy at all. The girl turned away and shed bitter tears. She understands everything, but it still hurts and hurts. Lin Xiao figured out what to do with it and suggested that the pink-haired girl release her hatred. Allegra looked at all this, how Lin Xiao touches the girl, and thought that he was a real pervert. Rosie looked at her and asked the guys in a whisper what was wrong with her. Is she jealous too? The blonde continued to call him that, which did not go unnoticed. The guy suddenly thought that Allegra's expression means her radar. Is she really jealous of him for Rosie? They just looked around. She shouldn't take it so seriously. The blonde snorted and asked why didn't he go straight and die? How strong was the enemy? The enemy is very strong. They are in a different league, which is no match for the garbage that they dealt with before. Lin Xiao advised Allegra to be more careful and keep an eye on everything that happens instead of being out of sorts. They are taking part in serious competition and now is not the time to show their character. The girl did not like such a remark at all, and she turned away angrily and with a snort said that she would then be silent, since it was their wish. Suddenly, Lin Xiao realized that the other team members were already on their way, grabbed the girl's hand and called her his sweet maid, so that the others would understand that everything was fine between them. He told her in a fashionably loud voice so that she stay close to him so that he could protect her if the enemies suddenly tried to attack them. The guys were surprised. Did they go back to normal so quickly? All this is so unexpected. Lin Xiao scratched the back of his head and asked if they would mind if he and Allegra were on guard. If anyone tries to ambush them around them, they will surely screw up if they get caught. Rosie suddenly said that she felt something else, and then the princess shouted to the guys to be careful, because people were hiding in the bushes. Caesar, like a true gentleman, told the girl to stay behind him, and he took out his weapon. He loudly asked who was sitting in the bushes and demanded to immediately get out of there and show himself to his eyes. Prince Charles came out of the bushes and the rest of his servants. Everything looked as if they had noticed them. Lin Xiao and Caesar could not understand how the prince ended up here, and maybe it was a trap. There was a thick hostility between the teams that hung in the air. Prince Charles said there was no need to stand guard because his command would not harm them. But Caesar disagreed with him. If they hadn't noticed them sooner, their Gongwu crystal would have been stolen long ago. Charles remembered that in the past Caesar had always called him sister. So when did he stop being so cute? From such frankness, Caesar suddenly began to stutter and said that he was lying. But Prince Charles really didn't lie. A few years ago, he was in the city of Besamavia to visit his father, and returning, when Caesar called him beautiful and pulled his dress. No, he literally hung on his dress and did not let him leave. He called him sister all the time. Caesar was much more honest and much nicer when he was younger. Caesar barely restrained himself from exploding at such an open provocation, and Lin Xiao put his hand to his forehead and hissed that his method was too weak. Caesar took out his sword and told the prince to stop squealing because it was time to fight. The girls at the back were also on their heads, but Lin Xiao stepped forward, asked no one to panic, and said that they would not fight Prince Charles's team, because this lady doesn't attack them. The lady prince confirmed that she was not going to attack them, and if she was to be completely honest with them, then she hoped that they would be able to have a good conversation. The brunette to the side did not understand what was wrong with this strange guy, and Caesar could not understand what they could be talking about. And then Rosie intervened. She decided that they should listen to the prince, or, as it turns out, a princess. The lady prince asked the blonde if he was Lin Xiao and how did he come to the conclusion that they were not attacking. Then Lin Xiao said that they were very weak, to which the girl replied that it changes. The young man replied that they have Caesar in the team, and they have Tuvalu, and if they collide, then only one of them will be able to keep the victory. And this battle is not working for them. The girl said that it was too confident of them. What if she wanted to fight them herself? Then Lin Xiao assured her that she wouldn't because she doesn't look like an idiot Caesar who loves battles very much. The person in question was unhappy with the name calling, but Rosie quickly reassured him. Lin Xiao continued. In the eyes of the girl, they are all just machines that will help her collect extra points. One day they will get enough points and will be worth killing them. The girl hummed in response and said that Lin Xiao's logic was in place and she would take it calmly. Caesar was oh how dissatisfied with everything that was happening. He asked the blonde if he was going to pit them against those pigs. Does he really not understand who is the farmer and who is the pig for slaughter? Lin Xiao put his hand on his shoulder and asked His Highness what he wanted to discuss with them then, or what kind of business is he willing to offer them. The girl opposite was shocked by such insight of an ordinary guy. He replied that all their intentions are so obvious that only idiots would not understand this. And this idiot who did not understand anything turned out to be Caesar, who was on his knees and whined that he was humiliated again. The girl really wants to offer them a deal. In fact, she knows the location of the silver treasure. It is located at a depth in the heart of the forest on this island. But this place is quite difficult, so much so that they can easily get lost there, and then they simply will not be able to find a way out of there without the right card. It seems that Lin Xiao already guessed what the girl was trying to propose to him. Is he really a 15-year-old boy? He remained so calm in the face of such a tempting offer. As a result, the girl said that she had 2 cards and one of them was real, and so she can give them 1 card. But Lin Xiao wasn't fooled that easily, and he knew right away that she wouldn't just give them such a precious card just like that. So what does she really want? The girl understood that the blonde was so smart, but did he still not understand what she wants? Here Caesar again intervened in their dialogue and said that Charles was a skilled man in spells. He heard it from his brother, so they can't have anything to do with him. He must stop talking and then they can get this card if they can finally fight the enemy. Lin Xiao told him that he was right, but didn't he notice that they were still not planning to join the fight? If they want to run away, then they will not be able to catch them, and then all things will simply disappear. The girls heard snatches of phrases that things would lose their power, and Rosie thought they were talking about them. Allegra asked who else it might be. The lady prince asked what they thought about the card. Lin Xiao thought about how they didn't have enough points and couldn't get close to the treasure. Therefore, they should not offer them a card as an exchange or sale. They are clearly not for items. His team doesn't know anything about this island, so they're not here for information, which means Lin Xiao walked closer to Allegra and asked if there were any other enemies near them. At first, she did not understand the question and stupidly asked again, and when the guy repeated the question, she suddenly screamed, "How did Khan understand this?" Then he thoughtfully said that they were not far from here and there were only 4 of them. However, they all stand still. The girl was discouraged by the fact that he could even count their number. Weeks, he also has the ability to detect. The blonde grabbed her by the cheeks, called her a fool and said that if he had the same abilities as hers, then it obviously would not have taken him so long to discover them. Lin Xiao then asked the prince if he wanted them to fight on his side. Then Charles replied that it was all very impressive. He hit the bullseye. Then Charles told Duval to send some kind of signal, and he understood everything. Charles himself hid behind a tree and wished Lin Xiao good luck. Meanwhile, Princess Shen Daiyan didn't understand why Prince Charles had suddenly disappeared, and Lin Xiao just exhaled with a groan. Then he abruptly stood up and told His Highness Caesar to prepare for battle. Luo Zi will cover for him, and Allegra will stay with him. As a result, after a couple of minutes, the team stood in a circle, waiting for the start of the battle and holding all their weapons at the ready. Then they realized that the enemies were nearby and Captain Y. Bulan from Shui Ni Academy came out of the bushes. He was convinced that the little Charles still kept his word. Looking at the team of arriving enemies, the prince asked Lin Xiao what they should do, and he replied that Caesar would be their sword. He should keep an eye on the big man and try to deal with the shield, and Luo Zi will help him. And yet, Caesar will need to guess the moment and break through their defenses, and he can take on a magician. Caesar confidently said that he would do everything, and everyone else too. Lin Xiao said that this time they can't retreat. They must send the enemies back to Narnia, and then they can use the card to get the deal that they agreed with Charles. While Lin Xiao was saying all this, he kept backing away, and even very far away, which did not go unnoticed. Rosie asked why he was going the other way, and the guy coughed and asked her not to look at it from that angle, because everything he does is called a strategic offensive. But the girl continued to think that he was just trying to get away from work. Lin Xiao, meanwhile, stood behind the demon lord and said that things were not as she thought. He's just protecting his maid. By the way, she asked him to stop talking, because if he continues like this, someone else will get the card. The opposing team used Stone Skin, a spell that enhances the defense of allies. Then they used the Path of the Heart and Mind, a 4th level enhancement spell that greatly enhances the 5th sense of the partners. One guy with a shield asked Bart not to worry and give it his all, and he listened to his captain. He used Antipathy, spinning a translucent blue disc in his hands. Lin Xiao was nervous, sweat was running down his face, and he hurried Caesar. There was a 6th level enhancement spell, Anti-Magic Barrier, and if the enemy manages to use it, then their team is definitely screwed. The fact is that the anti-magic barrier creates a field that reduces the speed of magic falling into it and reduces the effect of all attacking spells. Caesar gathered himself and used his wave sword to retaliate against the storm, but the enemy was able to deflect it with the divine shield of water. Everything around was lit up with a bright blue light. Other members of the opposing team watched from the sidelines, and the impact was truly terrifying. They are all level 5, but swordsman mages are still too intimidating. Then there was a massive explosion and Princess Shen Daiyan performed her signature cherry blossom dance, the 4th dance. Bart used a protection, a divine water blow, and after the brunette stopped near Lin Xiao and asked him for forgiveness for not doing well. In response, the guy turned around and told her not to worry, because she did a very good job anyway. Still, Shuni Academy is different from the rest of the garbage they had to deal with, and therefore, dealing with them is not an easy task. Now we need to see if Luo Jai succeeds. Rosie struck a pose and fired a thunder bullet, which surprised the opponents a lot. They didn't understand how this was even possible. Rosie screamed that it wasn't his fault, because it was all about the magical barrier, and the barrier cannot be broken by any spell of the 5th level or lower. But such spells require an impressive amount of mana, and because of this, the magician can quickly run out of steam. Caesar asked what they should do then, and Lin Xiao clearly had an answer to that. Lin Xiao asked Caesar if he could still use his storm attack, and he replied that he could, but only twice. Then the blonde thought that under the influence of the anti-magic field, the effect would be weaker, and then he asked Caesar to go ahead and engage in direct combat while Princess Shen Daiyan would cover them. And the guy himself needs a little more time. This didn't sit well with the team, but in the end the prince called Her Highness to do what they had to do. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao told Rosie that her magic would not work on them, so she would protect herself and Allegra. But the girl also wants to be useful in this fight, to which the guy replied that she would help them a lot if she looked after the Allegro. And it worked on the girl in the end. Vladica thought that she did not need protection at all, especially from such an idiot. But there was nothing to do, because Rosie had already pressed her whole body against her and said that she would definitely protect her from any danger. When the fight began between Caesar and the enemy, he used the divine shield of water. At this time, the princess fought with swords with another guy. Then she approached Caesar and said indignantly that their defense nullifies any of their attacks. But the guy thought they were just a bunch of pathetic cowards, nothing more. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao was conjuring something. He asked the snow fairies to hear his call, and Rosie explained to Allegra that he was going to do the double spell again. Then she asked the maid if she knew what the blonde would use, and she replied that she did not know. By the way, Rosie was still hugging her. Then Allegra asked the girl if she could help the guy, and she took it as a worry about him. The blonde just snorted. Is she worried about him? Of course not. The pink-haired girl didn't hesitate. She sees that Allegra wants her to protect the blonde. She must be honest with herself first and foremost, and then with others. The maid said that this was not true, and in general, she could not be so sure about it. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao used the crystal white snowflake, burning frost driving ice mist, and asked to remove the seal. The captain of the opposing team realized that something was wrong. Mana density is noticeably increased. Bart yelled to the captain to look to the side, and he saw the blonde. They realized that Lin Xiao was casting a double spell, but they didn't understand how this kid could do it at all. Isn't he just an imposter? The other guy told the captain that the guy was almost done with the spell and they had to stop him immediately. Princess Shen Daiyan and her Zakupa dance entered the business. The captain ordered his guys to cover his back and asked a certain Bati if he was holding on. He replied that he was alright, and then the captain asked him to help. He must stop the double spell of that bastard. Bati said that he would do everything and used bullish wildness. But then Caesar attacked him and told him not to think that he could defeat him with something like that. The captain threw the prince aside, just like a bug, and Caesar flew back. But then he used a hurricane and attacked back with a yellow arrow. Did you want to die? Did this captain think he could protect himself from this blow? Caesar's sword completely destroyed the captain's shield, shocking his crew. Shen Daiyan, who was standing behind them, said that they should not be distracted on the battlefield, and struck them down with a cherry blossom dance. Meanwhile, the captain noticed that Lin Xiao had almost finished with the double spell while he himself was fighting with Caesar, who was already barely on his feet. He realized that he could not block this blow, and in the end, the captain threw an axe at him, shouting that he should die. The axe flew towards Lin Xiao and his entire team suddenly called out to him. The brunette tried to catch him, but in the end she didn't get it and the axe flew even further. All they had to do was yell at him to be careful. Rosie asked Allegra what they should do if Shen Daiyan didn't catch the axe. As a result, Allegra did not wait for anyone and she herself ran towards the guy, pushed him away, and the axe swept past him and crashed into a tree. Everyone exhaled with great relief, and Lin Xiao was able to finish his spell. The captain of the opposing team swore savagely. He couldn't even move, and Rosie couldn't believe they had beaten those idiots after all. It was so great, and what would they do without Lin Xiao? The guy himself gave her a thumbs up, and then turned to the demon lord and asked why she kicked him, and she replied that he deserved it. But the guy is stupid. He realized that she wanted to save him, which took her by surprise. It's strange, because before she tried to kill him, but this time she decided to save him. The blonde told him not to even dream. She just thinks it's better to take his life after their contract ends. Lin Xiao snorted and said that even if she didn't decide to help him, he would have easily dodged the axe himself, and he would definitely have finished the double spell. But otherwise, she is of course very strong and she can even turn into an ale-eyed black cat and beat the guy with one blow. But as expected, it is impossible to wait for any praise from Allegra. The blonde suddenly called Rosie and Prince Caesar and asked them to quickly help him find one thing. Then the guys examined the frozen enemies, saying something in the name. At this time, in the camp on the island of despair, a white-haired girl was sitting on the ground and was tearing grass. Then she got up and with a huge backpack on her back, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. She is right there. At this time in the camp, adults looked at a large ice rock, where they showed the scores of the teams. Shuini Academy has already achieved 51 points. It seems like Wai Bulong from Shuini Academy is very strong. His shield is made from a winter crystal, and its durability is simply incredible. Combined with his defensive skill, no one on this island would be able to break through him, and it looks like Shuini Academy will win. Then Jennifer approached everyone else and with mock surprise said that Lulan Academy was able to make it to the top 3. It certainly wasn't easy for them. Momu, next to Wu Zai, was unhappy that that old hag had returned and spoiled everyone's mood with his behavior. She quickly returned back, which was a surprise. As a result, it was announced that Lulan Academy and Shuni were fighting together, and no one could understand how their glasses could cross on the pole. Jennifer told them not to worry because she would send people to pick up Wu Zai's disciples as quickly as possible. Momu furiously asked the woman what she wanted to say. The woman smirked and asked him if Long really thought that their boys could compete with Shuni Academy. Even dreams have a limit. Suddenly, someone shouted that the results of the teams were updated again. In the end, it turned out that the crystal of Shuni Academy was stolen and Lulan Academy won. Jennifer was just beside herself with rage and indignation. How could this happen? Wu Zai told the judge that he was already quite old, and his eyesight and hearing were bad at times, so he asked who won in the end. Momu laughed and said, "Is it really necessary to ask this again?" The same blonde-haired girl who stood behind everyone had received the information that Lulan Academy had won the competition. Most likely, this is all thanks to the young mistress. Then the girl moved a little to the side and made sure that no one was watching her. She took an axe and cut one of the tents with it. Inside, a quiet conversation between two people could be heard. Judging by the name, Alina is a girl, but she was not visible behind the raincoats. She was asked how the task was progressing. She replied that, as it was conditional, the material is made by different people. Papa Anderson, who was the second person, asked how much more time she would need. And then the hooded man replied that these half-demons needed 3 days to complete, so Dad had nothing to worry about. Then Dad asked what was up with that strange maid from Lulan Academy, and the person reported that her name is Allegra. Her background and skills are unknown. She looks good, has large breasts, silver hair and red eyes. After Dad heard the latter, he jumped up from his chair and said that it was no wonder they won the competition. This is because this maid is definitely not a person. The blood of a higher demon clearly flows in her. The girl outside the tent covered her mouth with her hand in shock. The man in the cloak asked the bishop what they should do now, and he replied that the maid was not their goal. The main problem was and will be Suyer. She said that she was going to visit the church in the kingdom of Hainer this evening, and Alina could not stop her. The bishop didn't understand why this witch couldn't just sit quietly in her place and not bother anyone. Then you need to bring her everything she wants there, and only then they can. Lin Xiao held the crystal in his hand and rejoiced that they were able to collect as many as 104 points. And while he was jubilant over their victory, Caesar was looking at a map that appeared to be correct. So Charles didn't deceive them. Lin said that Mr. Charles went through a lot of difficulties to organize this fight. They obviously won't use a fake to fool them. Caesar glared at the blonde, which made him very nervous. And why is he looking like that? Have you fallen in love? The prince pressed on his shoulders so that the guy sank to the ground and asked if he was tired, if he was hungry. He has some snack food with him. Lin Xiao took this as a harassment and began to stutter and convulsively say that he was straight. And even if it were not so, he would still choose nice little Charles and not Caesar. He didn't understand what the blonde was talking about. Had the side effect of the double spell affected him that much? Then Lin Xiao suddenly remembered him. He's actually a little tired. His head is just spinning. Then the guy lay down on Allegra's shoulder, which she didn't particularly like, as always. Princess Shen Daiyan also approached him and asked if he was alright. He does not have to force himself to get sick, they can all relax a bit. The boy stood up from the demon lord's shoulder and asked Her Highness not to worry about him. They should move out soon, because if the other team swoops in, then they may not be able to resist the enemies. And Caesar even agreed with this statement, but the brunette stood her ground. Lin Xiao is in a pretty bad condition and without him, they might not survive another battle. And then the team moved forward towards their goal. However, they did not know that they were being followed and followed. Alina in a hood. After a while, when the bright moon illuminated the sky, the team sat in front of the fire and tried to warm themselves from the coolness of the night. They all clung to each other in search of warmth, but Rosie suddenly got up from her seat while everyone was sleeping, and went somewhere in the other direction. She hoped very much that no one would notice her missing. She just needed to relieve her natural needs. She would never have thought that the lady of the Kayerde family would do this in the wild. But anyway, there were no toilets, so she simply had no other choice. After a couple of minutes, having finished all her affairs, the girl experienced an unrealistic relief. But in the next moment it was replaced by fear. An arrow flew in her direction at great speed and flew past, and the stone on her index finger caught fire in bright yellow. She was in a kind of dome which protected her from arrows. The enemies were clearly unhappy that this girl was able to block their blows. They fucked up big. Nearby, Rosie noticed people in raincoats and masks. One blue-haired girl with ponytails told Rosie that she really was able to set the navigator to protect against long-range attacks. It looks like they underestimated her. The other girl who was standing next to the first one, Loli, told her that it was not the pink-haired one who had created such a spell. Zyla asked Zaiwai's sister, who else could it be then? After all, there is not a living soul in the vicinity. Was it the ring on her finger? Couldn't the Kayerde family have let their offspring go without any magic tricks? Oh, those rich kids. Rosie screamed and asked who they were, and Zaiwai said that they completely forgot to introduce themselves. She is the captain of the Haitu Academy, Sibei, and Rosie shouldn't be afraid of them. She just has to give them the crystal, and then they won't touch her. Rosie fussed and said that she would not give anything to anyone. Then the Zai sisters laughed and asked this little girl not to joke like that again. How can a crystal be kept by a burden like this? She just has to become their hostage and not resist. That's all. Rosie didn't like the word at all. She is not a burden. They've been spying on her lately. Zai tried to say something about her underwear, but the pink-haired woman said that she would simply kill her for that. Zai replied that she thinks too highly of herself because she is a level 4 mage. They were all going to spare her, but now, the girl ordered her to take the bastard, but not to kill. The young mistress could not give up so easily, so she used the powers of her ring, which began to glow blue. Around everything lit up with a blue splash, and Sibei ordered her sister to shoot. Sila aimed her bow and arrows at Rosie, but they couldn't penetrate the armor, which definitely pleased Rosie. Opponents were surprised that the girl used a wind charge. It's 5th level magic, but they were sure that this girl had a 4th. It's all about that ring on her finger. Rosie asked if she really knew about the space ring. Dimensional ring. This is a magical device created by the highest ranking magicians that creates an inventory that allows you to store far more items than could fit in such a small item. And all this time they were magical scrolls. So that's what rich people really are. Zai asked the girl if she thinks she can do whatever she wants just because she is very rich. Rosie spread her hands to the side and said yes, the rich can get whatever they want. And she doesn't understand. Sila asked her sister what to do now, and she told her to cover for her. Even with this pile of magical scrolls, Rosie's stats are still too low. The pink-haired girl said that it was useless for them to come up with any new plans. They just have to die by now. What are they all capable of? The twin sisters were amazed at how many of these magical scrolls the girl had. She's just throwing money away. Luozi attacked them with lightning so they could taste it. But she didn't even hit Zai, who just smirked. The pink-haired woman didn't understand how it happened. And then Sibei shouted to Sila to shoot again. Sila pointed her bow at Rosie and fired an arrow with chain lightning, but it crashed into a tree. Suddenly, Caesar appeared and asked Luozi why she didn't call him for help. She did not expect that anyone would come to her, especially Caesar. While the sisters moaned on the sidelines, she looked at only one guy. It was as if the whole world had been reduced to one person. Sila took advantage of the hitch and fired an arrow again, but the blonde easily deflected it with his sword. From this, Zai, who did not stand in his way, fell next to the tree. Soon the rest of the team joined in as well. Lin Xiao expected Caesar to be lightning fast, but Allegra, who was standing a little behind, with her hands folded on her chest, asked with displeasure why all this useless flattery was needed. Meanwhile, Rosie tried to say something to Caesar, but suddenly tripped and fell. She began to grunt that she twisted her leg, and the prince had no choice but to exhale dejectedly and lift the girl in his arms. He told her that the next time she was in danger, she should remember to call for help. She must not lose her head. Now he was on time, but if this happens again, he may not be in time. The girl only thanked him embarrassedly. When Caesar walked past Lin Xiao with Luozi in his arms, he unexpectedly congratulated him. The prince started up, but did not answer. But Princess Shen Daiyin breathed a sigh of relief because they were both alive and well. Caesar said that Rosie was injured and he would take her away, and the princess and Lin Xiao must take the crystal of Hado Academy. As they were leaving, the pink-haired woman looked over her shoulder and stuck out her tongue at the brunette, but she just turned away. What childishness. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao told the demon lord that the enemies had been ambushing others for the past few days, but they only got 60 points. It's so sad. The blonde answered with displeasure, as always in other things, that naturally, only he himself could pull this off. And the guy did not deny, because her owner is just a genius in magic. Shen Daiyin was watching their skirmish, and she sadly thought that she was the only one who was out of her mind. Later, the team again sat in trees near the fire. Rosie was covered with a blanket next to Caesar, Lin Xiao was leaning on the sovereign, and only Princess Shen was sitting alone. She had two sad eyes. She could not look at these couple and just got up from her seat. Her actions did not go unnoticed by Lin Xiao. He opened one eye and then closed it again, as expected of a princess. The next morning, Rosie was reclining on a tree and said in her sleep that it hurt, and asked Caesar to be a little more careful with her. Then she suddenly woke up and was surprised that it was already morning. She jumped to her feet and noticed that Lin Xiao and Shen Daiyin were not there. Caesar yawned, stretched, and said that most likely the two were just patrolling, but he would still go and look for them. The demon lord opened his eyes and realized that there was no one around, and after a while, Caesar returned and said that they were not around. Allegra turned her head to the right and noticed a crystal next to her. Looks like something happened and they left the crystal and the map behind. Rosie was outraged. The two left without saying anything. What will they do then? But Allegra was perplexed because of something else. For some reason, the contract did not work. Then she looked down and noticed a strange glowing stone in her chest. She cursed at Lin Xiao and realized that the guy apparently planned to leave early in the morning, so he prepared the crystal in advance. But then she was distracted by Rosie calling her, who said that Caesar asked them to look for the treasury, so why is she just standing there? Had her mind gone after Lin Xiao? The blonde replied that it was not so and turned in the other direction. Rosie told her not to worry, because even if Lin Xiao was not here, they would protect her. At this time, Prince Charles was standing in the forest among the bodies lying on the ground. His receiver ran up to him and began to disturb him. He said that His Highness fell asleep again, and the blonde replied that he was fine. He has already rested, so they can continue their business. Suddenly, the blue-haired one suspected something and asked who was there when an arrow was flying in their direction. She hit right in the tree, and the guy told the prince that it must be the wind. Charles told Daival that he was too serious, and then suddenly Princess Shen Daiyin crept up from behind Charles and whispered a shadow murder in his ear. The prince abruptly turned back and the girl, whose face was hidden behind a scarf, quit. Is it really all going to end? She just cut off his head with her sword. Charles, the real Prince Charles, stood behind her and replied that of course everything was wrong. The brunette did not live like this. In the end, his guards and a girl stood in the clearing, and what she killed was just a fake. Charles said that it was too ruthless and if it was really him, but it would be very unpleasant. It was so tiring for him to pretend every night. Finally, he waited for this moment. Since Charles couldn't see the whole face because of the rag, he asked if she was from Shen Yuji by any chance. Her eyes betray her, and if she wants to kill him, then she will have to try very hard. And then the prince ordered his guards to catch the brunette. It doesn't matter if she is alive or dead. The main thing is not to let her escape. Shen Daiyin summoned the roar of the moon, the dance of the butterfly and the fluttering flower, and Daivalu asked if she really thought that all this would stop him. He stamped his foot, but then he could not understand how the girl was behind him, and even not visible. She used a shadow kill and a thrust directly to the heart, but the blue-haired one was able to resist. He considered all this stupid and weak tricks, nothing more. Other guards were surprised at the girl's attack. She simply disappeared from under their hands. Daivalu ordered them to focus on intercepting her attacks because she is very fast and cannot be given a chance to elude them. The brunette used a shadow flash, and Di Sha ordered all of his people to be very careful and block the girl. Shen Daiyin was behind him again, and then the guy realized that he was her target all this time. Does she really think she can finish him off like that? She is so naive. These two are fighting for life and death. Prince Charles stood on the sidelines and asked if this was all that a person from Shen Yuji was capable of. He used a reinforced magic shield and the power of lightning, which surprised the brunette very much, and then she was simply thrown away. She fell into a trap, and unfortunately, she realized it too late. Behind this booth, a group of teachers appeared, and Prince Charles asked their forgiveness for burdening them. They replied that it was nothing to worry about, because all this was due to the plan of His Highness. The prince replied that maybe the personal light field was just 6th level magic, but even 7th level knights couldn't always endure it. They will definitely catch that girl when she does lose consciousness. The brunette held on to the last of her strength, and one of the teachers ordered to catch her. She asked if they were trying to knock her out with some kind of lightning. How naive of them. Prince Charles called out to his soldiers that she was still conscious, so everyone had to be very careful. The teachers started using their shields and Daivalu asked His Highness if they should help them, and he replied that they should leave it to the teachers and protect him. Then Charles suddenly asked the girl what her name was, because her plan had already failed and she had nowhere to run. Only death awaits her, but if she suddenly agrees to cooperate, then he can save her life. He knows that people from Shen Yuji are obligated to commit suicide if their plan fails. She must be worried about being eliminated so easily if she suddenly betrays her company. But she shouldn't worry, because he has a plan for that. Shen Daiyin, meanwhile, tied her hair into a high ponytail and knelt in front of the prince. What other idea did he have? And the guy voiced that if she worked for him, then he would pay her well and she would be completely safe. Speaking of Shen Yuji, her plan was leaked and the assassination attempt thwarted. There might be spies in Shen Yuji. What does she think? The princess replied that this was a very good plan, and the prince immediately caught fire. He will keep his promise because she is so young, but she has already lost her loved ones, hasn't she? She doesn't want to die. It's a win-win situation that will benefit both of them, so she just has to team up with him. Princess Shen, with sadness in her eyes, realized that she really lost her loved ones. This conversation was interrupted by Lin Xiao, who called out to His Highness. Charles did not become distracted by him and asked the girl to simply lower her down to lie down, and then he would take this as consent. At this time, the Demon Lord and Lin Xiao were arguing somewhere on the sidelines. Diavalu took out his sword and asked His Highness to be careful. Day threw the sword aside, and then the blonde assured his knight that he had nothing to worry about. It seems that the girl is set to cooperate. It's just wonderful, but the brunette didn't think so. She laughed at his words and asked if he was joking. How can she miss him? Shen Dian removed the handkerchief from her face and took up her sword again while glaring furiously at the prince. He ordered his soldiers to hurry up and grab the bastard. But the next moment, the girl simply disappeared from their field of vision. Daiwo Lu ordered the others to protect His Highness at all costs, while Shen Dian used Shadow Flare. A fireball rushed at them from above and they began to use either a light barrier, or a supreme magic shield, or a wind sphere. From above, it all seemed so beautiful and colorful, but the princess had no time to look at it all. We need to finally finish off this prince. People in raincoats were thrown one after another in different directions, and the girl's eyes gradually turned completely black. Prince Charles is not going anywhere just like that. When the prince seemed to be preparing for his death, Diavalu abruptly shielded him. He caught the arrow and told His Highness that he would cover him, and he should just run. But the blonde suddenly stopped him by the hand and said that he had no reason to run away. It's just that the opponent is already at the limit of her strength. She can barely stand on her feet. And if his guess is correct, then this is her last move. A little more and the girl will change her form. In this form, her speed and strength are greatly enhanced. But it comes at a high price. Shen Dian coughed up blood and sank to the ground, unable to stand up any longer. As the prince expected, she fell. He quickly approached her and told Miss Mercenary to find out her true identity. As soon as the prince reached for her face, she grinned and quickly tried to attack him, but Diavalu again managed to stop her. He knocked them off their feet, and the princess again wondered if this was how it would end. There was a big bang. Diavalu knocked down a huge stone and Prince Charles realized that it was magic of the 7th rank, a meteorite of heavenly fire. But who could make it? The knight held onto his chest as blood trickled from his mouth. More stones fell from the sky, and when it was all over, the prince noticed that the brunette was gone. Daiwo Lu told His Majesty that this spell only hit certain places, and someone must have done it to save the girl, not to kill the prince. The blonde just thought about it. Meanwhile, Lin Xiao was carrying poor Shen Dian in his arms while she was covered in wounds and barely thinking. The guy sat her near a tree, covered her with his jacket and asked why she acted like she was an invincible cockroach. Luckily, he arrived on time, and she doesn't even know how difficult it was to keep up with her movement technique. The guy sat down in front of the princess on his haunches and began to think about how he could take more blood from Allegra to heal wounds, for the sake of a beauty who so badly wants to be a mercenary. The blonde moved closer to the girl as close as possible, and when she opened her eyes, she asked with fright what he was doing. The guy realized that it was superfluous and began his strategic retreat. He covered his mouth with his hand, covering his red cheeks, and replied that he did nothing of the kind. The brunette turned to him and simply thanked him for saving her. Her clothes were torn, but Lin Xiao said that she could take it. Art friends needed to help them out. The girl started up and the blonde asked what happened. Do her wounds really hurt that much? He can give some more blood. Shen Dian took his face in her hands and just kissed him. Lin Xiao definitely did not expect such a turn and stood with his eyes open, not knowing what to do. When Princess Shen Dian pulled away, she asked the blonde if he liked it. Lin Xiao's cheeks burned like tomatoes. He began to stutter, and then he just fell on his ass and shouted that he did not like it. He saved her. So much love as payment should be enough for him. Or is that not enough for him? The guy was just in shock. He said he didn't save her at all, he just... Without letting him finish, the princess said that they had better get back to business. He was sleeping peacefully with his maid, so why did he even go after her and end up saving her? Lin Xiao smiled and said that he didn't sleep at all. He followed her from the moment she left. The brunette just couldn't believe it. How did he know where Lona was going to go and what she wanted to do? The fact is that Lin Xiao already knew that she had been planning to kill Prince Charles for a long time. The brunette did not understand how it was, and the blonde grabbed her by the shoulders and asked her not to worry so much. He will explain everything to her as soon as she calms down and stops spinning. Lin Xiao picked up the jar of Demon Lord's blood again and started pouring it on the girl's wound as he explained that Prince Charles didn't have many guards during the competition, so this was the perfect moment to kill him. Her moon shadow and blossoming soul are too fast for him, and he could not keep up with her. But the guy knew Prince Charles was already there. On this island, in this forest, there is only one way to the silver treasure, so he kept on chasing and eventually managed to catch up with her. Shen Daiyan asked suspiciously how he knew that she was going to kill the prince. Tying a neat bandage bow on the princess's hand, the guy said that he had done his own little investigation about the guys she had killed. All of them were somehow connected with the transportation of people and the slave market. He questioned Caesar, and it turned out that those guys were heavily involved in smuggling. Most likely, her kingdom was doing some kind of business with them, and for some reason she needed to get rid of them. When Da King Holy Kingdom is being smuggled, they need to pass through the Hai Nuo Kingdom. And the hut of the fact that Prince Charles was watching them, she could not do this, and as a result, the princess needed to kill Charles. Shen Daiyan realized that Lin Xiao knew from the start that she was the killer. But how? She couldn't give herself away so easily. Then the guy asked her if she remembers the day when he patched up her leg after the competition. The girl looked at the bow and remembered something. Meanwhile, in the center of the island of despair next to a strange forest, Rosie flopped down on the rock with a weary sigh and moaned that she could no longer walk. She needs some time to rest and sit. Allegra, on the sidelines, simply folded her arms in displeasure, and Caesar looked at the map and said that they were getting closer and closer to the center. It also gets dark very quickly, so they definitely need to make a halt and rest a little, so that later they can move on with renewed vigor. Luozi suddenly jumped up from her already heated stone and snuggled up against the demon lord's soft and large chest. She was so comfortable and soft that she simply could not do otherwise. In her eyes, the demon lord was just an adorable cutie. She was like a kitten. The blonde furiously thought that she was a cat, the most noble black cat of the Scarlet Eye. But of course, she didn't say this out loud, and only gloomily endured all these hugs. At this time, Luozi raised her head and asked her if she knew where Lin Xiao and Shen Daiyan had gone. They've been disappearing somewhere for the whole day already. Allegra misses Lin Xiao, doesn't she? She should not try to hide everything, because the pink-haired one sees everything on her face. All the emotions and feelings that the blonde is trying to hide from everyone, from Lin Xiao and even from herself. She cares so much about him, so why not just take it for granted? Stop hiding her feelings and keep everything to herself. It could end badly. Allegra dejectedly suggested that the guy must be flirting with this Shen Daiyan somewhere, so why should she worry about him? But nothing can be hidden from Luo Jai. She realized that the maid was just jealous of the princess. Or does she really not like Lin Xiao? Allegra replied that of course she did not like him, but if she could answer otherwise. But Rosie did not understand how it could be so. She cooks for him, takes care of him, sleeps next to him or on his shoulder, and constantly pulls this kid out of all sorts of dangerous troubles. She's sure she didn't fall in love with him. Allegra snorted. Well, she didn't fall in love. Rosie kept stepping on the poor maid. She recalled that this time Allegra helped Lin Xiao escape from Wai Bulong's axe, and then her instincts failed her. When Allegra tried to at least something to answer such pressure from the girl, Caesar stood between them and asked what they were talking about. They must hurry, because it seems that there is someone nearby, so they are tired of leaving here as soon as possible. Luozi suddenly told the prince that he had come at the wrong time, and he could not understand what he had done wrong. The demon lord stood aside and pondered over the words of the pink-haired woman. Her instincts. Meanwhile, on the island of despair, in the forest near the lake, Princess Shen Daiyan was dozing near the tree, covered with Lin Xiao's clothes. She slowly opened her tired eyes and suddenly noticed that the guy himself was not around. She abruptly jumped to her feet and began to look out for his dishes and call by name, and soon the guy appeared nearby, while sharpening swords against each other, and asked Her Highness why she woke up. The girl asked where and why he had gone, because she had already managed to think to herself that he would not return for her. The blonde reassured the princess and said that he was just going after her swords. If the enemies found them, it would cause them a lot of unnecessary problems. The girl hesitated for a second, and then sharply snatched her swords from his hands and angrily asked what was in his head. She put one blade to his neck and said that he knew her secret. So why shouldn't she kill him right now? Although the guy was very nervous, even sweat was slowly trickling down his temple. He answered with confidence that she would not do this. They just can't. But Shen Daiyan was not very convinced. Does he really think she won't decide to kill him right there? Lin Xiao replied again that she would not. And then Shen Daiyan put her swords back in their rightful place. She's not joking around with him at all. Maybe a bit. From the outside, the guy looked pretty calm. But in fact, inside he was overwhelmed with real fear. He lowered the girl to the ground by her shoulders and said that her wounds were still not fully healed. She should sit down and take a good rest, and they could rendezvous with the others once she had fully recovered. They may feel something is wrong, because the two of them are absent for too long. The brunette just nodded in agreement and asked if he was worried about leaving her alone. At first, the guy did not understand the question and who it was all about. Shen Daiyin turned away with a sigh and replied that she was talking about his maid, Allegra. The guy remembered her and thought that she definitely should be fine. Won't disappear. However, the princess said that he showed how much he cares for her, and the guy replied that she could not fight. And Luo Jai is a little frivolous, and therefore Caesar will probably break his back with these two. The princess did not expect this answer, and only sighed in disappointment. At this time, on the shore of the lake on the island of despair, the Holy Virgin Suyur told the sisters that they were great fellows, that they even built a church on the shore of the lake. Then she turned to her servant Alona and asked her if the view around them was beautiful. Nana began to turn her head in different directions and said that the lake looks quite calm and she can even see all these islands that are in the distance. This view is truly amazing. Suyur was upset that she could not see this beautiful view with her own eyes, and only puffed out her cheeks from slight resentment. Then she turned to her sister, who was standing nearby in a black cloak, and asked her to tell her about what she was doing with this fat ass. The girl in the hood couldn't figure out what Sister Suyur meant, and she explained. They were all Papa Anderson's subordinates, and she thought they would take advantage of this delivery opportunity to smuggle contraband. But for some reason she cannot find anything like that in the vicinity. The girl asked if she thought it would be surprising that she could find something like that here. Realizing that she would not achieve anything, Suyur decided to change the subject. Either way, she can't stop them, so she just has to tell her what they're up to. The girl asked her sister not to make such rash statements anymore. Maybe now they are weak and powerless, but their church will never allow to discredit the bright name of the goddess. The blue-haired girl put her hand to her forehead and said that it was all pretty depressing. Who even wants to listen? All this nonsense. Nana put her hand on Suyur's shoulder and asked her not to get angry. Otherwise, she will turn their anger against her. Suyur took the girl by the cheeks and asked why she was protecting them. Well, they have a couple of followers. Yes, if not for their mission. Poor Nana begged the master to be a little more gentle with her. And in the end, the Holy Virgin asked her to calm down in the end. Nana asked what was wrong in the end and she understood. Still, she would have found something here. Great plan. The crying girl did not understand what this strange Suyur was talking about. It's pretty late, so she'll take her back. Later, walking a little behind her sister, hand in hand with Nana, Suyur said that she always suspected that Bishop Anderson was smuggling, but it seems that she was mistaken. They were delivering fake resources, of course, but the real goods they were trying to transport were the people who came with them. The sister still did not understand what she was talking about. And then Suyur summed up that their true target has always been half-demons. The cloaked girl stopped abruptly and asked if Suyur knew about them too. Nana whispered to her mistress that something was clearly wrong with that girl, and she asked her not to be afraid, because she was next to her. You just need to follow the tracks. That's all. When they entered the church, Suyur said that the priests had recently found out that there are people in the church who secretly perform experiments on people, so they sent her to Neverwinter to investigate. The girl in the cloak replied that the priests were magnificent. They look helpless, but they still control the activities of every church. Suyur asked if they were going to use the people transporting resources to create half-demons. The girl replied that Suyur is very, very smart. Along the way, the girl lit the candles that hung on the walls and asked her to follow her. The girls went up to the stone stairs that led down, and poor Nana did not like all this. She grabbed her mistress with both hands, because she had a presentiment that something very bad was waiting for them down there.